The story began in an underground drainage of a certain town, without protagonist Kamuro Naoki doing his job as an exterminator even after coming to another world. This time, he was cleaning the rat-like demon beasts called Mazmaskal in this world. However, our protagonist just saw these beasts as normal rats and figured that taking their tails might be better to show the proof it killed. He cut off all the tails and put the rest of the bodies in a bag. Kamuro wondered where he should waste them, but the prior options were to incinerate these bodies, which he couldn't due to inaptitude for fire magic. Kamuro looked at the forest in front of him, and observing how dark it was, he recalled hearing stories of this forest being a place where new adventurers get killed by goblins or slimes. He wasn't crazy enough to take risk of fighting monsters. However, Kamuro figured it would be fine to dump the remains in the forest and monsters would take care of the rest. So he throwed those rats away in the forest and ignored the sounds of monsters' screams coming a few minutes later. Kamuro thinks back on his life for a moment, about how he died in the previous world, and when he opened his eyes again, he ended up in this world. He couldn't understand what was happening around him in this world at first, but once he noticed it was all very similar to an RPG, Kamuro got used to it. And as for the reason why he was exterminating rats here was because he used to do the same job in his previous life, so Kamuro was just used to it more than anything else. In this world, when he joined the Adventurers Guild, it didn't take long for Kamuro to understand that he wasn't suited for a sword or the wand. At the port, adventurers hunt down water monsters, while the heroes fight against demon lords. Kamuro thought if there was a god who made heroes, he should have made a mistake in his selection by not giving Kamuro similar to those heroes. But either way, he was now making a living by killing bugs and insects, since after all, he was an exterminator who had yet to explore the mysteries of this world along with meeting some lively bunch of people. Now, we go back to the previous day in the town where Kamuro lived. He used to go a lot to the place of an elder elf Camilla who ran a drugstore. Her place was filled with various books and medicines, and Camilla was glad to have Kamuro come to take care of the pests. She was happy with his work, and Kamuro thanked her for the good review. He stated that he could also do the part of cleaning aside from extermination, so he did just that to make her place more vibrant. Camilla paid him 50 knots for the work, and Kamuro went off to look for something else he could do as an exterminator. When he was walking past the people, most of them were doing work as combat adventurers with knight armors and equipment. Kamuro wished he could have gotten other talent like that, but since he didn't get anything, he just got back to doing the extermination work. He wished he could get some basic materials and the amount he just earned in knots, which was known as the currency of this world. He decided to first find a place to stay for the night with the money he just earned. Kamuro went to the Adventurers Guild and lodging house beside it. This Adventurers Guild was nicer and bigger than the guild we have seen in any manga ever, and there were all sorts of facilities for the adventurers, so many of them roamed around here to spend their earnings. Kamuro brought the request document he took to clean Camilla's house, and the receptionist marked his request as completed. The receptionist Irene appreciated the good work he had been doing, after which Kamuro decided to check if there were any other requests he could do. But unfortunately, most of the requests in the board were either eliminating monsters or assisting in magical experiments. All of them seemed to be more suited for adventurers, so Kamuro knew he should look for something else since these were impossible for him. Before anything else, he considered that he currently has just 50 knots, and if he spends 20 knots for the stay-in, he would be left with 30. Then he heard some adventurers exclaiming to Irene if she was seriously telling them to go into sewers. Irene stated nobody else has been wanting to take that request in a long time, so this problem was getting more serious by each time. The adventurers replied they would rather take the job of eliminating slimes instead, as it was more suited for their skills. The adventurers took the job and left the place, while Irene was left sighing. Then Kamuro asked her if that request was something even beginners could do, and when she looked up at him, Irene recognized it was Kamuro Naoki. She informed him that the client of this request was the governor's office, who wanted to get the multiplying Mazmaskal eradicated from the sewers. Although the request would pay only 5 knots per head, Mazmaskal were hard to deal with given their quick and nimble agility. Not only that, but they were roaming inside the sewers, and apparently the usage of any magic was banned inside there to prevent any accidents. Kamuro noticed that this Mazmaskal actually looked like rays, so in the end it was just a rat extermination. So while Irene mentioned the harmful effect these rats could do by affecting the hygiene of town, Kamuro told her that he would like to take this request. Irene exclaimed to ask if he was really sure about taking this request, to which he simply agreed again to confirm. Irene thanked him for the help, while Kamuro stated it was fine since he was already looking for a job as well. Irene wished him good luck as he went to carry out the extermination, And now in the present time, Kamuro was glad after completing this request. He killed those Mazmascles with the help of rat poison he made himself, and since it was 5 knots per rat, Kamuro earned like 500 knots for killing 100 of the rats at once. He figured that if he kept this pace, then his dream of having his own place wasn't far off. He was fired up and all motivated now to go and mass produce more of the rat poison to deal with more rats later on. For that, he went to Camilla's place and asked her to sell him all the poisonous plants she had in stock. Camilla told him it would be 100 knots, which was too expensive for him, so Kamuro requested her to give him some discount on it. Kamuro looked back on her place, then Camilla offered him if he could come and clean her place occasionally, then she would sell these for 10 knots to him right now. Kamuro was extremely grateful for her consideration, so he held her hands out of excitement, which actually made Camilla feel shy, and even if she felt warm from his hands, she shook off his hands from hers. Kamuro asked her if something was wrong with her since her face was all red, to which Camilla replied it was nothing and he should leave now that his work was done here. After that, Kamuro paid her and got all the ingredients for making rat poison he needed. Next, he went to the market and bought some wheat flour and honey from the grocery store. On his way, Kamuro also happened to see a place which sold monsters' meat, so he asked the owner of the shop if he could give Kamuro some spoiled monsters' blood and fats. It was smelling real bad, which made it more suitable for Kamuro to choose it for the task as well. But when he went back to the guild, all the people were disgusted by the smell so much that they couldn't stop yelling. From taking in the stinking smell of the whole place, people asked him to just get out of here, because the thing he was holding smelled really terrible. Kamuro reasoned that he needed it to make something for the job, so he decided to do it here since he doesn't have a house. Irene exclaimed he should just take it somewhere else. Then when he asked if he could do it at the lodging, Irene told him that the stench of this thing would stick to the walls. Kamuro asked her what was the big deal if he did it anyway, because according to him, this was just a fantasy world, so nothing happening here was serious. Irene shouted she had no idea what he was saying. Then she told him to just do it on the backside of the guild. Kamuro went there like she told him to, and so he placed all the ingredients from poison plants to water, honey, and monster blood. He started doing his work by making rat poison from his plan. First, he started kneading dough from the wheat and mixed some water and honey to it. After that, he chopped the poisonous plants with a knife and kneaded them into the dough. Then he broke off the chunks from the dough into a dango and coated them in the monster blood and fats. After that, he sniffed the dango and they smelled quite good according to him, while no other human would ever dare to come close to it. Kamuro's special made rat poison was now complete, and it came out just like he expected. He knew it looked delicious, but still if anyone ate it, they would die, so he decided to mark it with a skull and crossbones to avoid any accidents from happening. Kamuro's plan was now at the stage of execution, as he went to those sewers and first looked at the map to get a better idea of where to set the bait, and followed the plan. He placed the poison bait all around the place, and once he was done setting it up, Kamuro went to a random place and slept outside because he didn't have any money on him after spending it all for making the rat poison. After spending the night sleeping outside, he woke up in the morning and quickly set out for work. When Kamuro went there, he was shocked by the sight of hundreds of Mazmascal rats lying dead all over the place. His bait seemed to have worked perfectly, which made him happy, and now all he had to do was to clean them up. He kept repeating the process of collecting the rats, cutting their tails, and lastly throwing them off into the forest. After that, he went back to the guild to collect his reward, and there, he got a bag full of many knots filled in as the reward. Irene was glad this request was being done at this fast pace, and Kamuro would again go back to the sewer to clean the rest of the areas as well. Next day he came back again to see the same sight of many rats lying dead there on the ground, and Kamuro repeated this process multiple times than previously, and managed to kill quite a lot of rats. He could have kept repeating this process, but Irene told him to just stop and asked what the heck was he doing, which made even the office call her. Kamuro stated he was just trying to finish his task before deadline. Irene stated that neither she nor the office expected there to be this many Mazmascals, because of which their expenses seemed to be on short for the reward. At this rate, she figured they might go bankrupt. She asked just how many rats he had killed up until now, to which he replied that he stopped counting after crossing 1,000. Irene was shocked by the number of payments he must be getting for all of that, while Kamuro stated he was just doing his work normally. Irene wondered just how normal this was for him, and Kamuro decided to stop by the office before washing the sewers. Then suddenly, Irene got startled by the loud sound of the guild door breaking down, which was actually done by Kamuro. He caught everyone's attention, since the gate of the guild was too big to be broken by just a newbie. Irene felt like she might know what was happening, so she asked Kimuro to show her the adventurer's card. Kimuro doesn't really pay that much attention to his card, so Irene had to remind him it was the card he received when he first joined the guild. Kimuro took out the card and handed it over to Irene, and she was shocked after seeing her expectations come true. She explained to Kimuro that when people level up suddenly, they would break things accidentally because of being unaware of their own strength. But even if that was the case, the level of Kimuro was just too rapid of a growth, as he was now a level 38 adventurer. This much growth was really impossible, considering that he was just level 2 a few days ago. Kimuro told her that he was just throwing dead Mazmascals that had ingested poison into the forest, so those monsters must have eaten them. That could have been the reason behind it, but still this rapid growth was just unexplainable from doing only that. Whereas Kimuro was a little fazed by how excitable this beast woman Irene was. Then Irene told him to keep quiet about his leveling method, because if it gets out then it would cause a huge riot amongst people. Kimuro asked her if level 38 was considered high, to which she replied that wasn't the main problem, but it was that levels were something that one have to raise by training their body and mind on a daily basis, while Kimuro was like a cheat. She informed him that according to the legend, the level of the hero who defeated the Demon King was 55, so it means that Kimuro's level was reaching that level pretty ridiculously. Kimuro expressed his surprise to know there were levels as well, which made it look more like an RPG to him. Irene thought he wasn't getting the point she was telling at all, but as for him, even if she said that his level was pretty special, he didn't feel anything odd after it. He stated he would continue his work now at his own pace, and hearing that Irene kept looking at how strange a personality he had. Later on, Kimuro went to Camilla's place to ask her something, but there was a young beautiful elf there. She got a little bit startled to see someone come while she was in her young form. Now a recall on Kimuro's life here. He was sent to this world after death, and now he wished to continue living as he did before as an exterminator and cleaner. He was unaware of what he was going to confront the next day on a new extermination. On the night of the next day, Kimuro was writing his journal like usual, and he added his new experiences in it today to keep a memo on things to remember. He wrote that exterminating Mazmascals have earned him enough to last for a while, so he asked Camilla to let him rent the second floor of her shop since it was empty. He had gotten a grasp of the leveling up system, along with skills. At that time, a girl named Sira entered his room, and Kimuro seemed to have met her that day, but he wondered why she suddenly started stripping down to underwear in front of him. Kimuro was feeling a little nervous, while Sira tried to get closer to him with clearly some mind-melting thoughts in her brain. Kimuro tried to get her to wait, but she insisted on spending the night with him the way she wanted, because after all, Sira was a slave who offered her life to Kimuro because he saved her and earned both her heart and body, which belonged to him now. Kimuro was having a bit of trouble trying to keep himself controlled against these heavenly proportions. And just to top it off, Sira told him to use her as he likes. Kimuro exclaimed out of nervousness if she was serious about it, to which Sira decided to prove it through her actions. Kimuro felt like there were still things out there in this world he was unaware of, and thought that Sira might be doing this because she was a slave. He could see in her eyes that she had no problems in doing this, but now we would get to know just how Kimuro got himself in this predicament from the start of this day. The day began with Kimuro taking up on a task where he had to confront many spirits and ghosts. Kimuro didn't expect he could exterminate them as well until he tried to spray them with a high-quality recovery potion. It worked greatly and he managed to finish this request to exterminate ghosts in the guild. Irene thanked him a lot for the help, as these ghosts have been doing some real nasty things, including harassing her. However, she was surprised as well to see he managed to get those high-quality potions, since they were very expensive. Kimuro replied that the potion and the spray were actually self-made by him, as he had raised his pharmaceutical and compounding skills to make this high-quality potion. He also picked up a detection skill, which displayed a map that showed the position and threat level of the living things around his area. He managed to achieve all these through a better understanding of the mechanics of this world, eventually getting the recovery properties effective against the ghosts as well. He has recently begun to enjoy this world, after having learned skills like fire magic, mathematics, and language through the skill points he got on leveling up. Kimuro couldn't help but laugh, noticing how frugal he was, and while checking skills he noticed that the reason he could communicate easily with others was his language skill. Now that his work was coming along just fine, he was relieved that he didn't have to worry about dying on the street anymore. He was happy to be living above Camilla, and whenever it was anything, she would inform him about it. So the following day, she informed him that someone came to see him. Kimuro wondered who it could be to visit him, and when he went down the stairs, he saw it was Irene from the guild. He mentioned not remembering taking any requests from the guild. Then she told him that it was a sudden request, or more like a favor since this request couldn't be completed by anyone except for him. He told her to wait until he got back from the bathroom. When he got back, Irene informed him that this sudden request was to exterminate a swarm of Vespa hornets nesting at an abandoned house. Kimura remembered these were bee-like monsters, as he saw them in the encyclopedia borrowed from Camilla. Irene agreed that was right, while Camilla was proud to take the credit for not only getting to live but also to gain knowledge while he was living with her. She was currently in her cute young girl form, and the old lady Camilla from before was the same person. It was just that Camilla used to stay young when she was not on working hours, and when she runs the store, she changes to old lady form. All because she believed that an old lady selling medicine would be more effective for sales. He couldn't stop laughing when he heard that. Now keeping that aside, Irene asked Kimura if he would accept this request. He asked why he was chosen for it, since he didn't want to be mistaken as a handyman because he also valued his life more instead of just throwing it away in dangerous things. Camilla told him that Vespa hornets were usually dealt by B-rank parties and above, but currently they had only C-rank adventurers in town right now. So, she was told by her superiors to ask him, since despite him being a G-rank, he had a high level. Kimura thought this was surely a low act from the guild, but since it was the first time he heard something like this he decided to consider it. He asked Irene if she was aware that Vespa hornets were very poisonous, and unlike Mazmascles, he couldn't simply just accept it. So, he tried to decline this request with a sorry. But when Irene made a sad face like a puppy, Kimura couldn't help but give in and told Irene to pass one statement to her superiors, that sending her over to get him to accept the sudden request was unfair. She asked him what that exactly meant. Then he shifted to ask Camilla if she could make some kind of anesthetic that would work on hornets as well. After that, Irene thanked him for accepting this request, and he told her it was fine since dealing with hornets was also a part of his job. He got right back to his work on preparing for this extermination, and mentioned to Irene that in return he wanted a favor from her. And after she heard what the favor was, she told him that won't be a problem for her to do at all and felt a little shy replying to it. So, he asked where this Vespa-nested house was located, to which she replied it was in a forest by the outskirts of town. Kimura noticed that location was in the same direction of the sewers, and so he used his detection skill level max, and in just a moment, all of the town's locations, people and even the positions of living things based on their threat level appeared on the map above Kimura. Irene speechlessly kept observing him until Kimura also added that he located hornets, which were quite many in numbers, and there seemed to be 3 green dots as well, which meant there were some people in that location also. Whereas, Irene and Camilla were completely shocked to see that he just used a detection skill just now, which allowed him to even see the ruins from this house. He stated it was only positions and number of living things. Then Camilla shouted that even if she lived for 800 years, not even her skills were of that high level, demonstrating that she was a shut-in researcher who hadn't raised her levels. Now, after some time, Kimura arrived at the destination where the Vespa hornets were located. He didn't expect this Vespa hornet's nest to be as giant as a 3-story building. He wondered how he should deal with this, and assumed from the nest size that hornets themselves must be around the size of a large dog itself. After that he went close to the nest, and checked the map of the place with the white of hornets and green dots of people around. He thought if those people were here, they might know of a way to deal with the hornets, and thus, he decided to first proceed through the back of the building. From there, he slowly checked the surroundings before entering the place. There, he came across a basement, and when he looked straight up the stairs, he saw it lead to a dark place inside the building. Once he arrived there, he was called out by a man lying down there with a knife and seeming to be relaxed. He said something about switching the shifts, thinking that it was one of his accomplices, but when he was greeted by Kimura, the guy shouted who the hell was he. Kimura wondered why a place like this prison was down here. Then he told the guy that he wasn't anyone suspicious, and the purpose of him coming here was to exterminate the hornets, so he wanted to ask him if he knew a good method to go about doing that. The guy exclaimed everything about Kimura was suspicious, and now that he had seen his face, he couldn't let Kimura leave alive from here as he charged at Kimura with his knife. Kimura tried to get the guy to stop by words, but the guy already hit Kimura with his knife trying to stab him. But to his surprise, the knife itself broke down, leaving the guy shocked to his bones. He ran away from there stating that he wasn't getting paid enough to deal with someone this strong, and Kimura tried to warn the guy that he was too loud. The guy got to see the reason behind Kimura's warning when he saw that Vespa hornets showed up right in front of him. The hornets pierced the guy's whole body with their thorns, to the point his body parts fell apart. Kimura noticed that one of the green dots from his detection map vanished. Kimuro knew this was bound to happen, since the hornets were really aggressive and very protective of their territory. They were carnivores that prey on other insects, and at times pack them into a sphere to bring it back to feed their young ones and multiply. Kimuro then used his fire skill to light up this dark room, and that was when he saw an old beastman and a young girl sitting there inside the prison. He figured that he might be able to unlock this prison door's hinge, and so he managed to enter the prison. The prisoners were sitting there with their heads low, and Kimuro assessed that even if these two saw that the prison's door was open, they didn't try to leave. The elderly beastman muttered that he thought they were abandoned already, while the other young girl said sadly they don't have any families and have been discarded. Kimuro recalled hearing from Irene that slave traders did exist, and so did the presence of other races. The elderly beastman Balzac told Kimuro that he didn't know who he was, but he wanted him to at least take the young girl if not him, because her previous owner exploited her a lot due to her special talents, since she was from the Gecko tribe. Not only that, but that rotten guy even casted a petrification spell on her once he was finished with her. And the young girl said she wanted to be left behind, whereas Kimuro just wanted his job here, so he told them that he couldn't leave them here, and asked them to come out. The young girl shouted out of nowhere to warn Kimuro not to touch her, and he kept his hand away from her. Kimuro could understand she might have her reasons and insecurities, while Kimuro exclaimed that the people who locked them here were also nice at first, until they showed their true colors. Kimuro was too innocent to be trapped away by their fake intentions, because of which she refused to believe any humans, thinking that all humans would only betray them in the end. Kimuro could understand she must be really hurt, so he decided to do what he could, and thus, he took out his healing potion and sprayed it on her. The girl shouted at him not to come any closer to her, because she was terrified that he might also cast some spell on her. Kimuro told her not to worry and this wasn't something harmful. Kimuro didn't want him to come closer, but since she was a slave, she didn't have much courage to oppose. Kimuro went and sprayed the healing potion on her, and noticed that even a high-quality healing potion didn't have any effect on her. The girl got sadder. Then Kimuro mentioned that he remembered reading a way to treat her petrification in an encyclopedia, but his friend might know more about it. The old beastman Balzac asked him if he really thought it could be treated, to which Kimuro said he shouldn't get his hopes up yet, and besides that, he told them that they at least have a reason to leave now. Balzac went and made the girl understand that this human was offering to treat her, so maybe he was different from others. The girl agreed to follow that, and then the only problem was their shackles. Kimuro checked the chains and thought he might be able to deal with it if he just pulled it off a little. And just like that, the chain broke down with his bare hands, leaving Balzac and the girl shocked by his raw strength. Kimuro cleaned his hands by clapping them, and then he informed the two that they should leave now and also to remain quiet and slow while doing that because of Vespa hornets. He guided them the way to the outside, and once those two got out, the girl covered her eyes with hands because of the bright sunlight they hadn't seen in a long time. Once she looked around her, she was amazed by the sight of the free sky, the bright sunlight, and the gentle breeze. She started crying from freedom as if she thought she was going to die in that abandoned life. After that, Kimuro told them that they don't have to worry about hornets this far, and now he would be taking his leave and going back there. Balzac wondered why he was returning back to the mansion. Meanwhile, Kimuro entered the house again, and this time he saw a pot lying there. He went and picked it up, then used his cleanup skill to not only wipe the dust but also turn it into a completely new state. He kept the pot inside his bag, and took out his chalk to draw a magic circle on the ground. Kimuro created the magic circle to generate heat with the help of symbology, which meant the way to make a circle produce different effects. The circle he made went well, and now that his induction heater was complete, he got to the main part of the plan, to make a bait for hornets. The ingredients he chose were honey and water he brought along with the anesthetics from Camilla. He poured the water into the pot and heated it using a magic circle, and then mixed it with anesthetic and honey. After that, he put the lid over it while it boiled and reduced it. The hornets often used to take over the bees' nest to get their honey, so it was his main ingredient to use as bait. So, Kimuro opened the lid of the pot once it was done, and after a few hours, many bees fell down from that solution. The anesthetic seemed to have worked effectively, and just when Kimuro felt happy about it, the other two slaves came from behind him and mentioned what he was doing seemed pretty amazing. Kimuro got startled and asked why they were here, but since he didn't have much time right now, he went with his brush to the 8 hornets he managed to paralyze. Kimuro painted the same magic circle on the bellies of those hornets, and this time, he increased the strength of flame it would produce. Balzac from behind recognized Kimuro was using symbology, which was a high-tier skill after alchemy and alchemy. After some minutes passed, the hornets which were paralyzed got back to normal, and they returned to their nest, while Kamuro hid himself and waited until those hornets entered their nest. After that, he quickly went outside and got away from this nest as soon as possible, while the slaves were still following him. Kamuro told them that he would be fine and go back home after doing this one last thing, muttering to generate heat, to activate those magic circles, and in the next moment, Balzac and the girl realized that the hornet's nest instantly blew up into a huge blast. All the hornets were blasted into pieces, which kind of made even Kamuro surprised, because according to him he just increased the firepower slightly, but it was clearly too much as anyone could see. Balzac asked him what exactly he was, and Kamuro thought it would be better to introduce himself. So, he introduced himself as a professional exterminator, and right after it he set to take his leave since his work was already done. But the moment he started walking, the other two slaves followed behind him. Kamuro asked them why they were following him, to which Balzac replied that the slaves who don't belong to anyone become the property of the next person who finds them. So, that means from now on, they belong to Kamuro. So that was how that night, Sira ended up in Kamuro's bed, trying to do some things as a slave but on her free will. He told her that he was good, and if he did it with a girl he didn't even fancy, it would only end up making him feel empty inside. Kamuro stated he wasn't refusing because she wasn't pretty or unattractive, and if it happens again he might just give in next time. But for now he didn't want to do it with her. She felt like Kamuro was surely a strange one. But either way, she liked how thoughtful he was. Kamuro told him to get used to this because that was just how he was, and she tried to give feints of seductiveness till the end until he ordered her to sleep. Later that night, Kamuro was still awake while Sira was sleeping. He wondered if doing close stuff was pretty normal in this world after all. And if that was the case, he never knows when something might happen, and he would just give in to these morals. But if that happened, Kamuro thought it might make him a loser. Then Sira asked in sleep what was a loser. After the Vespa Hornet extermination, Kamuro told them even if both of them belonged to him now, he would just release them if they were in servitude. Sira and Balzac clung to him while beginning to take them along. Kamuro didn't know what he should do in a situation like this, because his own life just got stable and it was impossible for him to take two more mouths to feed at this point. He started walking again, leaving them dejected. But after some steps, he felt heavy because at this rate he might regret leaving them. So, Kamuro took his newly gained slaves back to his house at Camilla's place, and before entering, he used his clean magic to remove all the diet on their body. But even though Camilla saw that he brought some slaves, she screamed angrily. And as he planned, Kamuro learned from her how to remove the petrification. Kamuro guided those two to his room and asked them to take a seat, after which, he took a needle since according to Camilla, touching the affected area with a needle soaked with high-quality potion should be enough to remove the petrification. After that, Kamuro managed to remove all traces of petrification. Then Kamuro noticed some scales were still there on her ears and thigh. She told him that these scales were actually a special trait of her gecko tribe, which makes it easy for them to blend into the night. Suddenly, Camilla got emotional and to Kamuro's surprise, she sat down and lowered her head on the floor to thank him for treating her. She requested Kamuro to allow her to serve by his side forever. Kamuro brought these two just because he couldn't leave them there. However, he told them clearly that he couldn't manage his own work life with those two together. Sira requested him to kill her right now if that was the case, and he didn't expect it to be this grave. He learned from Balzac that those two had nowhere to go, and because they had slave seals, it was also hard for them to find jobs like that. Kamuro wished he could do something for them, so he told them they could serve him for now if they feel that way. But he didn't like being stiff and formal, so he wanted to be addressed casually. Now with things decided, he introduced himself to both of them properly, and Balzac followed up with his introduction along with Sira being the next one. However, Kamuro reminded Balzac it was formal of him before, so Balzac quickly changed his manner and greeted him casually. He expected Balzac to be quick to understand and adapt since he was a veteran. But there was still a problem with Sira, who exclaimed to Balzac to not dare speak so casually to their master. Kamuro told her that she should learn something from him as well, so she had to agree with it. Sira replied with a cute okay, and stated she wasn't sure how long she would be in his care, and until then, she would remain in his care. Kamuro told them that they should now go shopping, and the three went out to the market streets with various stalls to shop from. There, Kamuro took his slaves to a clothes shop and got them a pair of fitting clothes, since the previous ones were tattered. Balzac and Sira were loud, stating they couldn't possibly accept such great clothes for slaves like them. Kamuro told them not to mention it, since these were second-hand clothes. He told them to make sure to let him know if there was something else they wanted. They could speak to him. Balzac accepted his words, and so he took an item for himself, for which Sira shouted at him for being so casual again. Kimuro told her it was no problem, and asked if there was something she wanted as well. Sira puffed her cheeks saying she was good, and mentioned that people would make fun of Kimuro if he spoils his slave. Kimuro figured that she didn't have any intention of leaving servitude. Then he saw some hair ribbons for girls and asked Sira to come close for a bit. He tried a ribbon on her hair and said it looked really good on her. She was like, she couldn't accept something like this, but Kimuro wished she wouldn't have been this formal. So, he told her if she didn't like it she could just toss it anywhere. Sira couldn't help but keep it since she liked it in reality. So next she heard him talking about eating somewhere before heading home. She again exclaimed that servants should not eat with their master. Then again he asked her to just loosen up. Kimuro and Balzac went ahead to eat and he gave a heads up to Sira that they were leaving now. She quickly followed them and the day went peacefully like that. Next day, Kimuro was at his house and Balzac went to wake him up and inform that Irene from the guild had come to see him. Kimuro wondered what she might have come here for now, and when he went downstairs everyone was sitting there and Irene wished morning to him. He noticed that Sira seemed a little surprisingly upset and glaring at Irene for some reason. He asked Balzac quietly what was going on, to which he replied that Sira was in a bad mood because she found out that Irene and he had a promise to go on a date. Now, Irene expressed she was glad to hear those two slaves seemed to be going well, except for the Sira show as obviously acting weird because she liked Kimuro. He stated that was kind of worrying for her future. Then he mentioned to Irene that their date was 3 days later so it was still time. Irene told him she was actually here with another request, which was to collect the remains from the cemetery near the ruins where the nest was. Irene informed him that the government wanted to make sure there were no remains left, so he got an idea to finish this remaining part. He told Irene if that was the case, he would like to let Balzac and Sira do it since they could prove to be useful with Sira having appraisal skill and Balzac with a good nose. They were surprised to be recommended for some job. Then Irene asked them if a slave would be able to do it. Sira admitted she could do something like that, but wanted to confirm Kimuro if he was sure about it, since slaves were supposed to be by their master's side, and he told her that he had something else to take care of with Irene so it would be fine. After that, he sent off those two to the work, and Sira was really fired up to get it done. After that, Kimuro said to Irene they could talk while having a walk. She stated it was surprising when she heard him asking for a date in return for the favor, and asked what he wanted her to do for him. He told her it was because she seemed to be knowledgeable, and he wanted to know more about this world. Irene was surprised to hear about him not knowing anything about this world, and after signing, she informed him this world was called Sorosophia, and the surface of their planet was a hemisphere with an edge of this world. Kimuro got a little bit of idea how it might be like an Earth but horizontally cut in half. And the town they were currently in was called Quibinia, which was located so outside the mainlands that it was also known as the Abandoned Land. However, it was peaceful here because there were no wars, but it always took long for any information from the outside to come here. That was all she knew about here, and this was more than enough for him. Kimuro wondered what the outside world might look like. Back in his previous life, he used to have TV and smartphones which made the information easily accessible. And he didn't actually miss those gadgets or lifestyle, but he wished to know a little more about the outside world. He wanted to know what else was there to see, and just where he was walking towards, because if he didn't, it wouldn't be any different from being imprisoned in a cell like Balzac and Sira were. As he walked, he wondered if the god who sent him here was looking at him right now, the same way he was looking at those two from the other side of the cell. He kept watching up in the sky wondering just how vast this world might be if this god was still looking at him. But not wondering about it for long, he got out of his imagination and Irene asked him as well if there was anything wrong. He told her it was nothing, and asked her to let him know if there were to be any good jobs for them. She replied it would be quite difficult since they weren't adventurers, while them being slaves would also be a hard part for employers to just accept them. Then she recalled there might be a job they could do. After all, once Kimuro got back home, he was welcomed by Sira and Camilla, and for some reason she was holding a towel in her hands. When he asked her about it, she reminded him that they actually had plans for going to bathe together. They set out for the public bathhouse together, and then Sira showed her the way to the bathhouse. Kimuro was surprised to see that she seemed to be more knowledgeable about the town now, to which she replied she did research on the town so that she could be of use to Kimuro. Once he arrived there, he saw that the public bath had a long chimney and guessed it must have been made with magic. Sira informed him that this place was built by someone 2,000 years ago, and that person was said to be another worlder. Kimuro was caught off guard by hearing something unexpected like this. Then he asked out of curiosity about more details on this other worlder. Sira replied nothing much was known about him aside from his name. Kimuro tried to imagine how it would have been, and thought that it must have been an ordinary guy like him who got reincarnated here. These things stayed on his mind for a while, and later in the bath, he had an idle chat with Balzac while soaking in the bath. Sira was washing her body in another side of the bath, while on the men's side, Kimura wished he could meet others. The thought of meeting others made him feel a strange kind of warmth, which he didn't get even from the hot bath. Next day, Balzac and Kimura were on their way through the forest by the outskirts, and Balzac was helping out fighting the monsters they would come across. Kimura was impressed to see Balzac was pretty good at combat, so he had increased the strength of his sword with symbology. Balzac was himself surprised as well to have a blade this strong, which actually used to be not that sharp since it was bought at bargain. So, it was mainly strengthened by Kimura, and he asked Balzac if he wanted it even stronger he could make it. Balzac said this much was polite and any stronger than thigh might turn this sword into an artifact-level equipment. Balzac was thankful and sorry for making a sudden request like this. Kimura said it was fine and instead this was the right timing for this. Kimura had actually made a big decision some time ago, and other than that, Balzac never thought that a slave like him could have gotten a job as a gravekeeper, and it was all thanks to Kimura for recommending him to the guild. Kimura stated he was told by Irene that the previous gravekeeper was killed by Vespa hornets. Balzac asked him if he had spoken to Sira about the decision Kimura made, but he was waiting for the right time to do so, since she would create a scene if he told her right now. He smiled as he figured that Sira must be working herself to the bone at the guild right at this moment. Sira had actually joined the Adventurers Guild, and soon she was about to have her training begun. Kimura had told her that she could learn a lot of things like aptitude here which would be better for her sake. He told her that he himself had gone through this test, and learned that he wasn't suited for either sword nor wand. After hearing that, Sira exclaimed that she would do her best through the training and become his sword in future. She was determined, which could be seen in her eyes, while Kimura was happy about it, but a little concerned with the latter. Balzac told Kimura that her affection towards him was beyond that of a normal master and servant, so if he were to discard her now, her distrust of people would worsen even more. Kimura didn't want her to feel like that, but at the same time, he wanted to operate alone since it was easier. Balzac understood that Kimura had already made up his mind, and it wasn't long until Sira would give a troublesome expression to him. He told Balzac not to say something like that, and they progressed on their way. Afterwards, they worked on completing their request for exterminating goblins, which was actually the sudden request Balzac made because he wanted to work on a quest together with Kimura. Kimura informed him that once he completes a request, he should always take something as a proof, like for goblins, he could just take ears since they were convenient. After that, they filled the bags with goblin ears and returned to the guild. However, it was not so simple on Irene's end, because she was shocked after seeing overstuffed bags of goblin ears, making her worry about the guild's finances. She asked him just how many did he hunt down, to which he replied that he happened to find a lot of goblins inside a cave through his detection skill, so they ended up hunting around 636 goblins in total. Irene exclaimed just 5 goblins was enough, heading towards which he asked her if there was any problem with hunting more. Irene stated that it was actually great that he defeated so many, but in exchange, the request had rewards based on how many goblins were defeated. And just like before, Kimura understood that guilds don't have enough to pay that much. Kimura thought about it a little, then he asked Irene for a favor, and once he was done telling her about it, Balzac informed him that Sira had returned from her training. However, she was in a really exhausted state, seeming to have trained a lot more intensely than she expected. He told her to clean up with the health potions, and then the one who was training Sira came to greet him. She was a beautiful woman in a night bikini armor. She introduced herself as Sira's instructor Isle, and was also called Guild's official trainer. Isle informed Kimura that she observed Sira had an excellent aptitude with magic, and if it was okay with Kimura, she would be happy to write a recommendation letter for the capital's magic academy. Kimura told Sira this was a really amazing opportunity for her, but Sira didn't seem to like hearing that, so she clearly declined from going there. Sira wanted to remain Kimura's slave, and a slave could only serve their master by their side. She also didn't think that a slave like her could go and study at the capital's magic academy. Isle confirmed to Kimura that Sira's talent was really notable, and it would be a waste for her talent to stagnate like this. Kimura asked Sira if she heard it herself, but she was crying and insisting on her own wish. She was selfish, wanting to always be with Kimura, and not wanting to go to the capital no matter what. Isle thought she should give them some space, so she went back. Meanwhile, Kimura decided to tell Kimura now, since everyone was here, that he was thinking of leaving this town tomorrow, which was why this day would be his last day with all of them, including Sira. He explained that he didn't know anything about this world, but after he talked to Irene and saw later on how happy Sierra was to explore just around the town, he started wanting to travel the world and see places out there. So, he told Sierra that if he were to take her along with him, she would be nothing but a burden. Sierra started crying after hearing that, but he couldn't deny his reasoning. So, Kamuro continued to tell her that he would have Balzac work as the gravekeeper for this town. Sierra was still fixated on tagging along with him, and resolved enough to tell him that if she were to die he could just toss her behind. Kamuro didn't like hearing that, and how considerate she was of him, so much that if she were to become sick, she would keep it hidden from him, which was dangerous for both of them. Sierra still told him that places outside town might be dangerous for him, to which he replied that his level increased a bit so he would be okay. Irene was shocked after hearing this, since she knew his level was rather raised a bit too much. She remembered something and told him that he should try to increase his rank to F. Kamuro asked her right away how to increase his rank, which was a bit unexpected since Irene knew he wasn't interested in ranks after all. Kamuro replied when he sent Balzac and Sierra to the cemetery the other day, they were made fun of because of having a master with G rank. Sierra apologized to him for letting something like that happen. Then he asked if she shouldn't be the one apologizing. Now, Irene sighed and told him that this might be the last time she would be sending him off from this counter, but he must know that both she and the guild were thankful for all the work he had done until now. Kamuro felt happy to be thanked, and he was also grateful for everything Irene and the guild had done for him. After that, he went to the examiner, who turned out to be Isle as well. She introduced herself again to him as this exam's examiner, and Kamuro thanked her for it. Isle explained this exam's rules to him, that he had to use any means necessary to make her acknowledge him, and he would pass if he managed to do it. Other adventurers from the guild noticed that Isle was about to fight, so they were interested in watching the battle maniac Isle go all out. But to their surprise, her opponent turned out to be just a G rank. They called him a newbie with weird attire to mock him, and wished him to do his best. Kamuro figured that was fine since he liked this jumpsuit. But moving on to his examination, Isle mentioned she heard that he had no talent for the sword or magic, so she gave him a wooden sword same as the one she was using. Kamuro took the wooden sword and got ready to begin this battle. Others were also there to see the battle, and then Sierra cheered for Kamuro to do his best, but she cheered for the instructor as well to do her better. Isle was amused by Sierra's cheering, so he allowed him to make a move first. Kamuro knew he couldn't do his best because that might end up hurting Isle, whereas Isle thought he was not paying attention to her, so she charged at Kamuro to attack, but he blocked it with his wooden sword. Isle claimed that much wasn't enough to stop her, so next she stabbed his chest with her sword. However, Kamuro didn't feel anything at all, and seeing that it didn't hurt, he figured that his strength was working. Isle asked him what kind of magic he used, and got back to charge again for an even stronger attack. Isle suddenly disappeared from Kamuro's vision to make her next move. Meanwhile, Sierra had started to hope instructor Isle would defeat Kamuro so that he would remain in this town. But she was aware that his chance of losing was impossible. She used her appraisal skill on Kamuro, while he was about to be attacked by Isle. Kamuro wanted to hold back from hitting anyone because he wasn't suited for combat, and might end up causing greater damage. But since he had no choice this time, he hit her with as little power as possible. But that was expected to be still much more powerful because right now, Kamuro was level 70. Isle didn't expect he was this powerful, so she fainted from the powerful hit and fell on the ground. Kamuro tried to ask her if she was alright, while each of the spectators were left shocked to see Kamuro just one-hit the instructor and they couldn't see his movements at all. Irene figured Kamuro had become stronger yet again, and in some minutes Isle opened her eyes and realized that she had lost. Kamuro asked her if he got a passing grade, to which she agreed he indeed ranked up successfully while making a sad face and went from there. Kamuro wondered if he did anything bad while he looked at her. In the next moment, Sierra came and hugged him while crying and declaring that she didn't want to part with him. But Kamuro smiled knowing he needed to go. Later that night, he held a feast for everyone to celebrate his last night in this town, and at that time everyone drank and ate to their heart's content, including Sierra. Once the party was over, they went to bed, and next morning at the town entrance gate, Kamuro was ready to leave. He thanked everyone for seeing him off so early in the morning. Then Sierra mentioned he didn't seem to be alright. Kamuro was a bit too drunk from last night, and this was the same case for Camilla and Irene themselves. His farewell was surely done with great pukes of the party. Then Irene told him that the expenses for Sierra and Balzac would be paid by the amount that the guild owes him. He thanked Irene for listening to his request. Then Kamuro gave Camilla some money in a pouch for the rest of the rent, and a thanks for the times she had taken care of him. And lastly, he wanted Sira and Balzac to be released from their slave seal, so he asked the two to show him their seals. He asked Camilla how to release it, so she told him that he simply needs to declare them released, and that would be done. Kimuro followed up with those instructions and the slave seal on both of them disappeared. Kimuro thanked those two for all the hard work, and Sira stated that she still didn't want to be separated from Kimuro. Kimuro told her she was being persistent, to which she reasoned that now she was not a slave anymore, she had the freedom to choose who to follow. Kimuro told her if she did that, he wouldn't ever talk to her because he also had the freedom to do so, making her all troubled and panicked. But it was clear that he was just kidding and politely told her next that he couldn't bear the weight of another person's life. He told Sira about an idiom he was fond of, that one should treasure every encounter since it won't recur. It means that a person may never know when they were meeting their friends or any person for the last time, so they should treasure those encounters while they last. He believed and liked this kind of lifestyle, which was why he requested Sira to respect his wish. Camilla asked him if he remembered how she got mad when he brought those two slaves, and mentioned that his idiom might have a good meaning related to it. But from her point of view, what he was doing right now might be the same as other slave traders who discard slaves when things get bad for them. And if he wanted to be alone, then he should have freed them before anything else. Kimuro felt a little troubled when he realized that he should have done that, so he exclaimed at Camilla for being unnecessarily sharp at times like this. Irene told him that it usually takes 7 years to graduate from the magical academy, but if Sira were to skip grades, then she might be able to complete it in 2 years. Kimuro told Irene to not say things like that. Then Sira loudly announced that she would become stronger no matter what, and at that time she would join him. Kimuro figured he couldn't help it now, so he sighed and then moved to do the thing he was going to do anyway, and gave both Sira and Balzac a pouch. He informed them that it was a communication bag, with a magical circle embroidered in it. With that, they would be able to contact each other no matter the distance. He actually made these for times of emergency. Then Sira got emotional and said she would contact him every 5 minutes, but he instantly declined that it would be annoying. Kimuro told her if she misused it he would take it back. Now everything was done for the farewell, so he went a little further and said goodbye to everyone. It wasn't easy for others to exactly say goodbye to him, but it was something they couldn't help, so they sent him off with smiles and cheerfulness. Once Kimuro started walking, he didn't stop until he got a call from his communication bag, which was obviously the doing of Sira. Kimuro eventually walked and crossed some distance until he got further away from the place. He never once looked back once he started, and just proceeded straight on his path. There were times he would get approached by the passing merchant carriages for helping him travel, but he refused then since he liked walking more. He preferred a solo journey at his own pace, and something like that was pretty good according to him. But on his way, Kimuro came to notice through his detection skill that he was being followed by something invisible behind him. So, he decided to make a small magic circle with symbology, and decided to set up an ivy trap to catch them. Soon, he heard a voice coming from behind, which meant that the trap was successful, and when he went to check up, he didn't expect Isle the instructor to be the one to follow him. She was trapped in vines, and he asked what she was doing out here by following him. She replied that she had already resigned from her post at the guild, and now she was just an adventurer. Kimuro asked her what she wanted from him, to which she replied it was obvious that she wanted a rematch against the man who defeated her in a single blow. She claimed that she was a famous warrior, but before she could complete her sentence, the vines gripped tighter on her body, making her beg Kimuro to get them off her. He told her that he wasn't interested in any duels, and the magic would wear off by itself in a while, so just bear with it. She asked him if he was really a demon to be this cold, to which he replied that he had no interest in strength or anything. It was just his levels which raised quickly due to the nature of his job. She didn't know about what his job was, to which he replied that he was just their friendly neighborhood pest exterminator. She couldn't believe that a pest exterminator could be this strong, and misunderstood that he was talking about monster extermination instead. He told her that she should go back, but Isle didn't want to be a useless instructor anymore, when she could be chasing something she was curious about now. After that, she came to know that Kimuro's current destination was the neighboring town of Oslo, and offered to show him the way there as his uninvited comrade. He asked her again just why she was following someone like him, and even going so far as to resign from the guild. Isle claimed that she was really famous around these parts, and so that was why she couldn't accept being defeated by him. He understood that she was surely a battle maniac, and then she asked him how he managed to remain unharmed by her attack back then. Kimuro replied that he just embroidered a magic circle on his clothes to increase their strength and defense, since he didn't want his clothes to be damaged. Isle was surprised to see he could use something so tough as symbology, which pretty much made sense behind his strength. Isle didn't seem to want to leave even after knowing that, and when he asked her to, she got really desperate to stay with him. She told him that she could fight monsters in their way to help him. Then he reminded her how she would help if she was weaker than him. After which, she claimed to be good at dissecting monsters and using their meat to cook something for him. But Kimuro said he could do that by just buying it once he reached the town. Isle's disappointment was clearly visible on her face, and if that was the case, she muttered that if he wanted, she would even offer him some service at night. She figured it might work out since she was confident in her body to pleasure him in various ways, and thus, she begged him again to let her become his comrade. Kimuro was really sure now that women of this world know no bounds at all, so he told her to put her thoughts on hold and she could help in combat and dissection for now. He knew that she would tag along no matter what he said, so he would wait until the right time to get rid of her. After walking for a while, they arrived at the town of Oslo. Kimuro observed this town didn't seem that much different from the previous one. Then Isle informed him that was the case only in terms of appearance. He wondered what she meant by that. Then Isle told him they should go and sign for an inn first. Kimuro had something to say about it, that he actually spent all his money on Sira and Balzac, so he was all broke right now. After that, they went to the Adventurers Guild of this town. Isle mentioned she could have lent him some money if he was short on cash, but he replied that helping Sira and Balzac was something he wanted to do with his money, so now he wanted to be responsible and earn by himself to make more. Isle stated she would be taking some quest in advance for herself, and there she saw a request for hunting field boars, whereas Kimuro wanted to pick something that F ranks could accept and cover the fees for. After he looked at several requests there, he came across one which piqued his interest. Isle was at the reception to register for the request she took, and after seeing her B rank, the receptionist approved her to go on that request. Kimuro was impressed to see Isle was actually a B rank. Then she asked Kimuro if he would like to raise his rank, since it would widen the range of selection of quests. Kimuro claimed he wasn't good with dangerous quests, so he wanted to pick something safer. Then the adventurers in the guild recognized Isle from her famous nickname as the Sword Demon Isle, with her signature bikini armor. Then Kimuro submitted his request at the counter and told his rank F to the receptionist. The adventurers around the guild started laughing at Kimuro's rank F despite him standing beside Isle. They were commenting all sorts of things on him, but Kimuro didn't care about it at all, and Isle told him again that he was getting laughed at because he wasn't raising his rank. He told her it was fine, since it happens often. Then Kimuro asked him if he was really okay with being made fun of. Then her eyes fell upon the request he chose, which was to exterminate the bugroach infestation at the estate of a slave dealer. Isle exclaimed that he won't be getting even noticeable experience for defeating them. He told her that his goal here was to just cover the inn fees, so it didn't matter, but it was still not worthy according to her. After hearing that, other adventurers burst into laughters that accepting a request like that was surely a joke. Isle didn't like others running their mouths, and he told her it was fine. Isle couldn't let that slide. Then Kimuro reminded her that his job was extermination of pests, so he clearly couldn't fight with swords or magic like her, which was why doing this request was fine with him. He smiled to reassure her it was okay, and Isle could feel a sense of satisfaction from his smile. After that, both of them went on their own quests, with Kimuro arriving at the estate of the slave dealer. There, he was welcomed by an old maid named Tell, who was assigned to guide him the way inside this place. He happily followed after her to begin a new quest with new experiences. Recalling back on his life, Kimuro remembered that he was chosen by God to reincarnate in this world, and here he chose to do the same job of cleaning and exterminating pests. He came to learn about other worlders like he might be out there, and thus he decided to go on a journey to explore the world, hoping to come across one of them. And to do that, he had to part with some important people he made in this world, and on his way he would get to know many more people and cherish those encounters with them. Now currently he was on his quest to clean the bugroach, a very fast-moving pest with a black lustrous body. In simple words, for him it was just a cockroach. When he went and checked the mansion, the first impressions were on how huge it was, with being 3 stories high, and Tell asked him if he could start the cleaning and extermination immediately. He noticed that most of the houses in this world were made using wood and stone, just like this slave dealer's mansion. He figured that the wood of these houses might rot and the stone would crumble, leading the bug roach to find its way in and started to propagate inside the walls. He used his detection skill to check the whole house, and to his surprise, the whole house was filled with bug roach hidden all around and inside the walls. He entered the house and Tell informed him everyone he see around here were all slaves including herself, so she asked him to refrain needless contact with anyone. Tell was like the head maid of the house, do everyone asked her what to and she would get work done by everyone. After that, she went to her busy master and after calling him a couple of times, he replied what was it. But when Tell informed him about the cleaner arrival, he just told her that he was busy so he leave it to Tell. Tell obeyed her master, while her master wondered why their slaves weren't selling these days. Kamuro noticed that Tell's expression didn't shift even after that sudden order, which showed how dignified she was. He now wanted to get started with his quest, and after examining for some time, he went back to the guild. He met Isle in the dining hall of the guild and they talked about their quests, with Kamuro coming back early to form a plan for how to complete this quest. She noticed that his bag was full, so her battle mind could only think it might contain some spoils of war. She excitedly took the bag without asking, and when she opened it, some weird things were kept in it, from the glue trap for small pests and others. Other adventurers screamed after seeing those weird and dirty things, and Isle quickly blamed Kamuro for not leaving things like this on the dinner seat. He exclaimed that she was the one who opened it without permission to blame. Next morning, the sun rose in the morning and Kamuro went straight to do his job. He already learned from yesterday's investigation that the mansion was filled with two things, bug roaches and mazmascals. So, he brought the rat poison and glue traps to deal with both. The more troublesome were the bug roaches, so he used detection skills to check the roaches' locations. They were spread all over the mansion, so he figured he would need something on a large scale. He asked Tell for a few things he needed to get rid of all the roaches, for which first he would need to chase them down to the lower floors. Tell agreed he could choose any method from the third floor to the ground floor, but Kamuro stated he would need to clean to the very roots where they come from. That means the basement. Tell firstly told him there was no such basement here, but when he told her that would mean going against what her master wanted, she agreed to show him the door to the basement. The basement was lined with prisons and slaves all around. She warned him to see where he steps, because there was a chance that he might get attacked if he gets too close to the slaves. Kamuro figured she was right about him having to be careful, since they couldn't do to those slaves because they were precious goods for a slave dealer. So, that was also why Tell must have tried to ignore his question about the basement, since if anyone requests to enter here they would surely become suspicious in the eyes of the slave dealer. He figured he would need to be careful now. After that they went all the way to the lowest room where the stench of sweat, odor and excrement was in the air, which were all the sure places where roaches gather. He saw there was only one prison which was completely enclosed. He asked Tell if he could use that room, to which she didn't mind but warned him firsthand that the slave inside there was from the wolf tribe with a terrible temper. Kamuro figured he would be okay, so he entered the prison and in the darkness, that wolfman slave got enraged at whoever entered. Tell stated if he needed the room for a minute, then he would need to do something about that slave. The wolfman attacked Kamuro just like she warned him before, but to her surprise, Kamuro just shook him off with his hand and used a little fire magic to calm that slave. Kamuro told Tell that he would give that wolfman a healing potion later on, but for now, he wouldn't have him leave the room. Next, he asked Tell if she had done what he asked of her before, to which she agreed it was all done like he asked, according to which every door and window would be closed for next few hours, and those who were cooking at that time were to leave while turning off all the stoves. She asked him if this would really help the extermination process, but he just asked next step if he could remove the slaves from here, but that couldn't be done, so Kamuro had to do his thing as of this. Then he looked at her as if he wanted her to leave, so he directly alerted her that this room would soon be getting very noisy, so she should leave. Tell told him that she was fine and it was part of her duty, whereas Tell was actually having doubts on Kamuro, thinking that he might be a spy sent by one of their rivals, considering that he was too sharp and strong for an exterminator. She couldn't speak anything odd or chase him away due to contract, but she at least wanted to make sure to watch every single move of his. After that, Kamuro made a small induction heater through symbology and took out a small box and placed it on the circle. Tell asked him what was going to happen now, but Kamuro was too focused on his work that he just ignited the magical circle. He had made circles all around the house, leaving no place unchecked, and once they ignited, the small boxes kept on magic circles released smokes with a slight blasting noise. Tell was scared after hearing explosions coming from the above floors, and asked what the hell did he just do. He answered that he just made some smoke, which was made from the same medicine used in rat poison and glue trap. After which, he set up one of these boxes containing that medicine and a magical circle in every room. And now, Kimura just ignited every single one of them except for the one in this room. In short, it was an insecticide he made himself, and the reason for it being in smoke form was because it could reach anywhere since it was a gas, and made it effective even for small pests like bugroach. She asked him if he could really defeat monsters with just smoke, then he asked Tell to put a cloth on her mouth quickly. He told her that he could have done so, but since he needed to have proof of extermination and show it to the guild, to make her understand what he was trying to do here, he asked Tell what she would do if whole house was on fire except for one room. Tell replied she would run with all her might and evacuate to that one room. And just then she got the concept that Kimuro's main plan was to force all the bug roaches in this house to gather in this room they were currently in. The bug roaches came quickly to this room and soon, it was full of thousands of bug roaches around everywhere. Kimura quickly used his detection skill and saw that now all the bug roaches have gathered in the basement. So he used the final ignite and it killed all of them in just one go. He told Tell that this smoke was non-toxic in small amount, but if taken in too much it could be dangerous. He asked Tell if she was okay, but to his surprise, Tell already fainted while standing there at the same time. He figured that he should carry her out from here, and so on the next day, Kimura left in a carriage early morning. He thanked the carriage driver for picking up him and his friends, to which the driver said it was fine since he was going to next town either way. Meanwhile, Isle was laughing at him continuously, exclaiming he was surely not just a normal person. The reason for her laughs was the story that happened with Kimura, and from a third person's perspective, it looked like an adventurer who left for a cleaning job came back with a maid. Kimura replied it couldn't be helped, because the dealer didn't have enough cash to pay for the task. He was shocked to see just how many bug roaches were there in his house, so according to 2 knots per roach, the final payment was turning out to be 20,000 knots. The slave dealer was left speechless, so he politely asked him if he was interested in slaves by any chance. Kimura replied he wasn't like that. Then Tell stepped ahead and requested Kimura to buy her. Kimura was a bit surprised when Tell offered herself like that, and that was how he ended up in current situation. He heard from Tell that she had spent a large part of her life working as a maid in that mansion, so her experience was said to be at a decent level which might prove to be helpful for him. Tell thanked him for buying her, even if her body could no longer provide some physical services. He told her that her former master didn't want that issue to damage his reputation, so that guy was basically forcing her on Kimura. Then Isle introduced herself to Tell as his companion, but Kimura denied that she wasn't his companion, which Isle burst into tears. She asked him if she wasn't good enough for him, and he asked her to keep her distance, but she did the opposite by offering him some good stuff at night. Kimura was managing to keep his control barely, since even Isle's smell was good enough to turn him on. Now, Tell lowered her head and said she would be under his care from now on. He asked her to be more frank with him, but she declined being so frank with her master. Their journey progressed and Isle asked Kimura what were his plans from now on, and also their stay at Oslo was really short. He replied that went there just to secure living expenses, and now he wanted to continue to explore the world. Tell informed him if that was the case, then he should board a boat at the next town. Isle got excited hearing about boats, so she excitedly gave her agreement and couldn't wait looking forward to it. Kimura praised Tell for good work here, and she felt honored to be of use to him. He told her again to ease up a little, while Isle started laughing seeing Kimura having problems talking with a senior. Suddenly, numerous wyverns showed up in the skies around them and surrounded the carriage. Isle, Kimura and Tell wondered what that roaring sound was from outside. The carriage driver shouted out that wyverns were everywhere around them and he immediately stopped the carriage. Isle quickly got off the carriage to hunt down these wyverns, which were known as dangerous beasts that dive from sky to attack their prey. The wyverns were so furious that an adventurer needed to defeat one of them to get to B rank, so the presence of this many was surely dangerous. Kimura looked out of the carriage and on one side, saw there were some other merchant carriages aside from theirs as well. While on the other side, Isle was fighting with the wyverns by herself, and he asked her if she needed help. Isle claimed it was no problem for her to deal with these lizards, showing she was a battle maniac through and through. After that, he felt hungry and turned to Tell to ask if wyverns could be eaten. She mentioned that wyvern's meat was said to be tasty. So, once all the wyverns were hunted, all the carriages settled down. Then they dissected their meat and cooked it over fire to prepare a delicious meal for their lunch. Others were delighted to have this rare wyvern's meat, and Kimura wished to put some salt in as well. It was Tell's first time seeing how her master interacted with others, so she asked Isle if he was always like this. Isle replied if she was talking about his randomness, then considering she met him only recently, He was surely interesting to be around with. She stated that wherever he goes, it feels like everyone around was already involved. Tell started to realize the qualities of her lord. Then one of the carriage drivers mentioned that wyverns shouldn't be around this period, because they were usually hunted by the red dragon from a long time. Kamuro wondered if this red dragon could be one of those super dangerous and big dragons. Then one of the carriage men asked them if they were adventurers. Could they go and check out the red dragon's cave nearby, because recently it had been causing many casualties in the nearby village. Kamuro got curious about this red dragon now, so he asked the other two if they should go to check it out after all. His sudden decision made Isle and Tell surprised, but he didn't think much of it and decided to do it despite Isle's yelling. After 2 days, they arrived at the port town called Marinaport, which functioned as the entrance to this continent. It was bigger and livelier than most of the towns Kamuro had seen so far. There were a lot of ships docked by the harbor, and since he arrived in the nighttime, all he got time to check out was the guild and inn to stay. Next morning at the inn, a good breakfast set was on the table prepared by Tell. When he came to the dining table, he saw Isle and Tell with a well-prepared breakfast, and they wished good morning to each other. Isle already started to dig in the food and told Kamuro to try this delicious food as well. Kamuro figured he was yet to taste the cooking of Tell, so he took a seat and asked Tell to take a seat as well instead of standing. She didn't feel like a slave could eat on the table with their master. Then again Kamuro told her she could do it, since food would get cold later. Now he began to eat the breakfast, and after tasting it, Tell got a really warm and bright response, as the food she prepared was really good. He and Isle tried the other dishes as well, and Isle also took some from Kamuro's platter. Meanwhile, Tell was starting to feel something strange in her chest from this scene. Later on, they were going through the shopping district to head for an area, which was actually the location for Kamuro's new request he picked up. I'll read it out that the request was to clean up the shipyard and exterminate Mazmaskel's infestation. She asked him if he was sure about doing this request right away, when he just got a good enough of money from a previous quest in Oslo. She stated it won't cost that much for those three to get on a boat. Kamuro mentioned that he was actually thinking of getting a boat for themselves, which came out as a surprise to Tell and Isle, since boarding one for one time and owning a boat were separate things. But after listening to Kamuro's reasoning, that if he had a boat of his own, he would be able to proceed however he wanted and whenever as well, it made sense to her. It was also necessary for traveling the whole world, and Tell also added that might be a good idea, but even a small boat wasn't cheap to get. However, Kamuro might manage it himself since he did get 20,000 knots in one day. Isle couldn't help but burst into laughs while agreeing with Tell on that. Now that their current goals were set, Kamuro and Tell were going to the shipyard, while Isle went on to sell the bag containing wyvern's scales and some meat, which could be fetched at a high price. From talking about wyverns now, he recalled back on that day when he heard of the red dragon, and actually went to his cave. The cave was really huge for them to not doubt it was a dragon's lair, after which he and Isle confronted the dragon with a gigantic crimson body with a cry that shakes the air itself. Isle braced herself before the dragon to resist its overwhelming aura, and Kamuro warned Tell as well to stay on her guard. Kamuro recalled that he might know of a solution, so he used his skill points to learn the dragon language. He could now understand that the dragon was furious about strangers barging into his lair. After that, Kamuro and the red dragon had a communication, in which Kamuro informed him about the wyverns. The dragon immediately set out to deal with those wyverns and eat the ones he heard were already dead. Whereas Kamuro was a bit shocked that the dragon was just an introvert who went outside only to eat. Once the red dragon was done, he gave Kamuro one of his scales as a token of his appreciation. But after seeing it go back to slumber, Kamuro had this idea and understood that he should be careful about many kinds of monsters, which could be helpful in future. Now, he was on the way to the shipyard for his quest, and on the way, he made sure to take care of elderly Tell walking and climbing downstairs. They kept walking the pathway beside the shore, as Kamuro seemed to like the good weather and sky out there. But as for Tell, she felt that strange feeling again and started wondering about it. Soon, they reached the shipyard and Kamuro informed the gate people that he was here to clean and exterminate the guild. They welcomed him inside and the owner of the shipyard, Borak, gave a warm greeting to them while mentioning that finally they were here. He offered to show them around, and Kamuro felt that Borak was quite hasty with the cleaning. Borak mentioned that they were currently in the middle of building a ship right now, and the size of the ship was really huge, which was surprising to Kamuro, who was planning on getting a small boat. The workers stated that Borak had worked really hard in his lifetime to build this shipyard, so everything here was basically the result of continuously building quality ships. Borak exclaimed to the guy to get back to work instead of running his mouth. Then he told them that he would inform them about the request in his office. Once they entered the office, Kamuro understood why Borak was in so much hurry. Because the whole office of his was looking more like a broken down storage house which functioned for years without once cleaning. Borak got busy the moment he went into the office and asked them to give him a moment. Tel mentioned this job might be a tedious one. Then by mistake, her hand touched a cup and it started to fall down. Tel couldn't react quickly to that cup falling down, but fortunately Kamuro caught it and saved it from breaking. Tel tried to thank him for helping fix her mess, but suddenly Borak shouted at them to be very careful here, because everything present in this room was important. Kamuro apologized to Borak and said he would be more careful. Then Borak realized he was a bit too loud before, so he quickly apologized as well for raising his voice. Borak told them that they sometimes become irritable while working, and said that the reason why this room was so messy was because they had only guys working around here. And having so many guys who are passionate about boats didn't exactly mean they would be good in things like housekeeping, which was why he had to make a request to the guild. But before Kamuro arrived, nobody wanted to clean any of this mess. Borak asked if it would be okay to ask Kamuro to get started with the cleaning right away, to which Kamuro replied it would be fine. But cleaning this whole office would take a couple of days. They happily agreed upon the time. And next, Kamuro took the duty of extermination while Tel would do the cleaning. They got to work with all dedication because any less than that wouldn't work here. And after hours of working, Kamuro was exhausted for the first time while doing something the same as Tel. Their first day of work was over, and then they met up with Isle at the guild. She asked him how the shipyard was, and they started telling each other about their day. Kamuro learned from Isle that she won in the arena, which she just participated in to test some new skills. She also sold the scales, and reminded him again she was a famous adventurer after all, but he was just too strong that she got defeated. Kamuro was glad to hear things were going well with them, until she mentioned that she also won a boat ticket and prize, which was quite hard to get hands on during this time of the year. Kamuro thought that Isle was choosing to board the boat, and owning a boat might take him time, so that meant they would be parting here as well like another treasured encounter. Then Tel spoke up that she had something to say, and she seemed to be worried about something. Kamuro wondered what it might be, then suddenly, Tel lowered her head and apologized for causing him shame during the afternoon. She reasoned that a slave shouldn't cause their master to apologize, and thus she was ready for any punishment for her mess. Kamuro felt it was unnecessary, so he told her that if she had something to say, then she should do so whenever she wished without paying any heed to her status. But Tel reasoned that his reputation might be damaged if she did that, or it may also cause the client to withdraw the request. He assured her that won't be a problem even so, and she doesn't need to work that hard if she feels like that. He said sorry instead if she ended up underperforming because she was enduring this. Isle knew this was just like him. Then he stated to Tel that she should say something if that would help them work better without holding back. Tel was now sure that Kamuro was actually treating her like an equal. It made her feel that strange feeling again. Kamuro added that today their client Borak apologized immediately afterwards, so it meant that he was not a bad person. Isle said she would also help out tomorrow. Next day, those three went to the shipyard, and this time, the workers of that place, including Borak, were amazed once they saw the results of his previous day. Many Mazmaskals were hunted successfully, and lastly, he cleaned them out. Whereas on Tel's side, when she went to the kitchen, she saw there were many dirty plates in the sink. Tel quickly embraced herself for good work today, and she started cleaning up the plates. After some time, Tel cleaned up the whole kitchen, which was shining wherever one looked. The shipyard workers were surprised by this cleanliness in this place. Then Borak came and punched them for lazing around in working hours. But when he saw what those lazy guys were looking at, his jaw was left open by the shock. Then Isle came and greeted Tel while checking up with her. She helped clean the bags with dirty things and carried them all with just one hand. Borak was both shocked and happy by the efficiency of work. Later on, he also got to see delicious meals prepared for everyone, which made him doubt for a second if it was for him. Tel nodded in agreement, and at the same time, Kamuro also arrived to join in the dinner. All the guys, including Borak, were stuffing their mouths with the tasty food they haven't had before, and Kamuro praised Tel for the good work as always. After some time, Kamuro heard the sounds of Tel and the chief Borak. Tell was scolding him to sometimes clean the stuff himself, and he should be setting up an example himself for the other subordinates of his. Borak agreed with lending a hand with the cleaning as well, and Kimuro felt like these two looked more like a man being whipped into shape by her wife. This was when he felt like they looked like family, and reminiscing back on this word family, he wondered if he would have won some time. They continued their job for a whole week and finally completed it, while getting closer to the chief and his workers. So, the next morning of that day, Kimuro and Isle were preparing to leave after saying goodbyes to everyone. Isle stated she might cook for them once since they seemed to be requesting her for it. Later on, while Kimuro was walking around to meet with the chief, HSI workers were looking from the corner of the wall and signaled Kimuro to quiet down. Kimuro quietly looked at what they pointed, and there he saw Chief Borak and Tell were standing by each other's side. The workers informed him that there had been a good atmosphere between Tell and the Chief Borak, so they asked Kimuro if he could give them some more time. Kimuro didn't mind it at all. Then suddenly Isle came and latched onto him while being loud, asking what was going on. Kimuro got pushed ahead because of her, and it interrupted Tell and Chief Borak. Kimuro was not happy by this, but now that he was noticed by those two, he couldn't just get back. The others were bummed because of Isle's mistake. Then Kimuro went towards Tell and stood there. As the warm breeze from the ocean kept flowing around them, the workers told Isle to stay put this time. Tell broke the silence and informed Kimuro that she got proposed by Chief Borak. He was shocked by that revelation, and when he tried to congratulate her, Tell told him she felt like being at a loss because she had been serving as a slave at the mansion for most of her life. And now that she was old, she wasn't sure if she could survive in the outside world. She asked him if he remembered her cooking when they first arrived there. It was the first time for her that her prepared food was eaten the moment it was done, and also got complimented for making it. She revealed that her chest felt tight at that time and she couldn't understand what that feeling was. Apparently, whenever she cooked for her previous master, he would just reply that he was busy and leave the food on the table. The food would remain kept for some time, and then eventually get thrown away later on. But when Kimuro praised her cooking, she finally got to feel how it was like to be happy. Kimuro was glad to hear that, and after a minute, others saw Tell moving towards Borak. She gave a smile to Borak and then he took out a box, and when he opened it, there was a proposal ring inside. Tell was happy and she reached out her hand, and everyone was amazed by how well it was going for those two. Kimuro was glad to see Tell found someone who loves her, as Tell also recalled having been released from her servitude by Kimuro a minute ago. He told her it was really happy to see she got to start a new life, which was pretty similar to how he started one in this world. He assured her that she could start making happy memories and make up for all she had been through as a slave. Toe was really happy after she heard that, and now she was finally engaged to Borak. Everyone cheered for this couple, and Kimuro was really happy before when she told him about herself and her feelings, hearing which made him really glad to see. Tell broke into tears of happiness as she was really grateful for Kimuro to give her this life. She thanked him a lot for everything, and thus he said goodbye to her and left. On his way, Isle asked him if he was sure about leaving so early, to which he replied that he already said his goodbyes, so it was the right time to leave. Then Kimuro asked her if she was sure about giving her ticket away, and she said it was only a backup kept for their travel if Kimuro didn't get a boat. But she gave it away to Tell thinking it might be a good wedding gift for her, and now she asked Kimuro if he was worried for Tell. Kimuro muttered he wasn't worried at all since he knew that she would do just fine with Borak and stay happy for the rest of her life. Isle felt relieved after hearing him say that, and he was a bit surprised that the chef had a good eye for falling for Tell. Then Isle wondered if it was going to be just her and Kimuro. She thought if they might ship together as well. Isle told him she was into people stronger than her, but he just kept walking without taking the hint. Isle kept getting closer to him and he exclaimed why she was trying to do something. She loudly asked if she couldn't do that, and that was when Kimuro recalled that he forgot to ask the Chief Borak about a boat, and now it was hard for him to go back since they already said goodbye. Next day after seeing off Tell, Kimuro and Isle stayed at the same inn and she saw him with a bag in his hand. He was thinking of using it to give Sira and Baltsac a call since it had been a while talking to them. He reminded Isle those two were the duo he bid farewell to in Quibinia, and she also remembered those two who got closer to Kimuro before. Meanwhile, Baltsac was doing his job as the gravekeeper when he got a call in the communication bag. He picked it up and heard Kimuro's voice from the other side. Kimuro said it's been a month, and he was relieved to hear his energetic voice, which meant he was doing fine. Baltsac informed him that everything was going well there. Then Kimuro asked him if Sira was in the middle of it sometime, as he called her before but she didn't pick up. Then suddenly he got a loud call at the same time, which was from Sira, who asked if she was talking with Kamuro. He said he would call back at another time if she was busy, to which she exclaimed at him not to hang up. He asked her if she was doing well there, but she said no, because she was having to pass each day without Kamuro and missing him a lot. She asked him if his travels were going well. Then Kamuro told her that he was traveling alone at first, but somehow his companions increased. Sira quickly asked if that companion was a woman, and that question made herself a little nervous. And when he answered it was a duo consisting of a maid and a female warrior, Sira couldn't contain her anxiety, and shouted loudly at Kamuro to get away from them because they might be tricking him. He told her that the maid left them the previous day, which made her really happy. She cheered for that one, but bounced back to ask about the other one. He mentioned that she might know her already, as she used to be Sira's instructor. Sira gave it a thought and exclaimed she remembered her. Isle then boasted to Sira that she couldn't forget her, after all she was the one who recommended Sira to the capital. Isle expected to hear some words of thanks or gratitude, but Sira called her as exhibitionist instead. Isle hated to be called that, so Kamuro agreed that was somewhat right. Sira and Isle were onto each other's nerves now. Then Isle got an idea and smiled like a devil. She started to whisper at first, then pretended as if Kamuro was doing something to her all of a sudden. Isle started making sounds and saying things as if Kamuro was making a move on her, which made Sira really uncomfortable, and it crossed the limit when Isle made the sounds of being shaken by Kamuro. Sira's mind was reaching its limit, as she started to imagine from Isle's life that Kamuro was doing some embarrassing things to Isle, and Isle was not holding back at all in generating just the sounds, to make Sira lose her mind even more. Isle kept on doing that and sounded like she was being pushed around everywhere, until she whispered some snacks. Sira couldn't hold back her pretense of solo performance. Then Kamuro took the call bag away from her, asking what the hell was she doing. Isle smiled and said to Sira she could put her best efforts into studying in the meantime, while she would take care of Kamuro. Sira was on the verge of collapse, and thus their transmission got cut off. Kamuro told her not to tease Sira again like that, and Isle called it a payback for calling her an exhibitionist. After that, she went off to wash her face, and then they would be off to breakfast. Isle also left a message for him that if he really wanted to do that, she was always ready for it. Kamuro felt shy and yelled at her that he had no intention of betting a woman he didn't have any feelings for. Afterwards, Kamuro kept getting calls from Sira, and she kept interrogating him every second. Later on at the inn, Kamuro asked Isle if she knew someone who was knowledgeable about monsters. She asked why he was interested in it suddenly, to which he replied he was just wondering if there was someone who was familiar with monsters and doing research on them. Isle states there were indeed some people called monsters scholars. Then Kamuro mentioned that he currently knows of only Mazmascles, Vespa Hornet, Bugroaches, and the Red Dragon, which were all different from the pests he knew. And since they were going to cross the sea, there might be more dangerous monsters waiting for them. So, he figured it would be reassuring to have a monster scholar with them. Isle mentioned there were rumors of gigantic creatures on the other side of the sea. Just the thought of dangerous monsters lurking made her all excited, which made Kamuro a little uneasy. She informed him that she knows a monster scholar who lives here in this town, and asked if he would want to meet her. However, she might have a lot going on for her. Kamuro learned the name of that monster scholar was Belsa, and she was the daughter of the former lord who used to manage these lands before. So, everyone in town knows of her, like she was a celebrity. He figured that he would have to find out about it himself, so Kamuro paid a visit to Belsa's house the next day. When he arrived there, he saw an old stone house, which was on the brink of collapse, and upon knocking the door, he heard a faint reply from the inside, but nobody opened it. After that, he peeked in the living room, and there was moldy bread with the person he was looking for, Belsa. She seemed to be on the brink of death for some reason, and he asked her quickly if she was all right. After that, Kamuro provided her food, which she engulfed hurriedly as if she was starving. Some food even stuck in her throat due to rapidly eating, and Kamuro offered her some water. He asked if she was able to speak normally now, and once she drank water, Belsa replied she was really grateful for the delicious food. She claimed that she almost died from starvation, and he was surely her benefactor to come at a time like that. But this was the first time she even looked at his face and asked who he was. Both of them introduced each other, and then she showed him the adjoining room after Belsa learned Kamuro's purpose for coming here. Apparently, her room was completely messed up and unhygienic, like any typical researcher. It had remains of many monsters, and even the research progressed on them. Kamuro was amazed to see the research room. Then she said that she remodeled this room, and got too absorbed into the research and exhausted all her funds. So, now she hasn't had expenses to live properly for the past few days. Which was why he found her in a state like that, and apologized as she didn't think she would be able to help him. Kamuro told her that she could just earn money in that case, because it was a boon to adventurers to have someone knowledgeable about monsters. She might even join an adventurer's party and help those adventurers who fear monsters by educating them on how to deal with different monsters they fear from. It would create more work for her. Belsa had already thought of doing that many times ago, but she gave up on it because she felt like she was hated by everyone. He didn't get what she meant by that, but to solve this situation, he asked if funds would be enough to run this place and continue her research. Once she agreed on it, got on to use his lifestyle magic, cleaned up her place. Belsa was surprised by how tidy her place became easily, and he made it even better by offering to become her sponsor. She didn't expect anyone would ever sponsor her, and now Kamuro was there to fund her research, in return for which he wished to see the results of her research. He also offered her to procure samples as well, and Belsa felt like she was living a dream right now. He gave Belsa 5,000 knots to start with, which was similar to having like 500,000 yen. Belsa's jaw was dropped on this sight, then she collected herself and said she couldn't accept this. She explained to him that monster research was like a journey with no end, and if he was looking for some result, then Belsa didn't feel like she would be able to meet his expectations. She was not happy at all saying so, but to her surprise, Kamuro told her it would be fine, because he was doing this out of pure curiosity, and it would be great if they learned something that could come in handy in exterminating monsters. So, he wanted to give this a try, and Belsa asked him if he was really sure about it. Kamuro nodded in agreement, which made Belsa really happy because now she would be able to continue her work. She cheerfully exclaimed, "Let's get started with this," and so, Kamuro went back at the end of the day. From then onwards, he would go back to his inn at night, and come back the next day in the morning. It created a routine for both of them, with Belsa being able to conduct her research and experiments on monsters, while he provided her monsters to be tested on, along with the cooking duties. He saw her conducting research and spent the whole day on it, while he managed to get more specimens for her research. Belsa was enjoying how her research was going on, and it made Kamuro happy to see her having fun. After that, he got back to more work and started preparing food for Belsa as she was busy with research and couldn't cook. He prepared delicious meals, which had become a daily thing for Belsa, who used to starve once. Kamuro asked her casually what inspired her to become a monster scholar, as he was always surprised by how proper she was at handling monster carcasses. She replied that part of it was because she had always been interested in monsters, and the rest was an event which happened in her life. She looked outside the window, wondering how 5 years had already passed since that time, when Belsa was extremely depressed and apathetic, to the point that she would basically just sit in one corner doing nothing. At that time, someone came to her and encouraged her to inherit her father's will and do something to benefit herself and other people in town with it. It was thanks to those words that Belsa was able to become who she was today. She informed him that her father used to be the lord around here, and after his retirement, he appointed that someone, who at that time was a lieutenant and now the current lord. Kamuro remembers hearing something about that from Isle as well, and he mentioned that the current lord sounds like a good person. Belsa agreed that Guy was indeed a good person, and once they finished breakfast, she got back to continue her experimenting. Meanwhile, a shady person in a covered hood seemed to be spying on Belsa's house, and he reported to the current lord. Once he was there, he reported it to the main butler serving the lord, and he passed the report to the lord that from the past few days, Belsa seemed to have been visited by an unknown man named Kamuro Naoki, and also he had been assisting Belsa, due to which her research began once more. The lord seems to be unsettled by this report, as he stated that they should have let her die. He asked the butler to bring both Kamuro and Belsa to him at once. The butler asked what they should do about her research, to which the lord replied he didn't care about that, and they planned on attacking her at night and burning her whole house along with her research for all he cares. So, the evening came, and at night, the place where Belsa's house was located was on fire. And next morning, Kamuro was sleeping peacefully when Isle suddenly barged into his room and woke him up urgently. She asked her why was she making a ruckus this early in morning, and when she informed him about Belsa's house, his sleep vanished and Kamuro hurriedly ran to Belsa's house. But on his way, he met a shocking scene of the soldiers pointing their swords at him and accusing Kamuro for treason against the kingdom. The soldiers claimed that if only he didn't interfere, they wouldn't have to burn Belsa's house and then kidnap her. Kamuro wondered just what these guys meant by his interference, but since Belsa was kidnapped, he had no time to act timely. So, he reached out his hand to the sword pointed at him, and to the soldier's surprise, just a little push from his hand holding the point of the sword, Kamuro made the soldier sit down on the ground unable to move. Kimuro warned these guys to start explaining things to him with a cold expression on his face. After that, they ran down in the town going towards Belsa's house, and there, they witnessed a crowd of people standing in front of Belsa's house. Kimuro passed through the crowd to check how bad the situation was, and once he arrived there, the situation was not just bad but worse to their surprise. There was nothing left of Belsa's house except some stone walls. Everything else was burned down to ashes, and then the people there asked Kimuro if he was Belsa's friend. Kimuro agreed to them, and then they informed him that after searching through this wreckage, they didn't find Belsa inside there. Another guy mentioned that he saw some guys last night who seemed to be in a rush, and he saw Belsa being kidnapped by the butler. Kimuro asked them just who this butler was, to which they replied he was the Lord's personal butler who had been a champion of the arena in the past. The people claimed it was impossible for them to stop this butler from kidnapping Belsa. And after hearing this, Kimuro recalled that Belsa mentioned everyone in this town hated her. He was a bit confused about that now, because from what people said, they seemed to be worried about her. He asked them directly if they don't hate Belsa, and after looking at each other with a pause, they replied that actually, Belsa was still worried about what happened 5 years ago. They claimed they used to be awfully immature back then, and upon being asked by Kimuro for rest, they filled him in with the events that took place. Kimuro and Isle didn't waste any time, and thus they ended up going to the Lord's mansion. They saw that the gate was wide open, and there was the Lord's mansion just in front of them. Then a voice came, asking them to stop right there because no one was allowed to enter here without permission. This voice belonged to a man which looked like the butler people alerted him about. Kimuro understood what they meant, then Isle spoke up having heard of the butler. She was excited while thinking that this butler might be a good opponent. Kimuro started taking steps towards the gate and asked the butler if Belsa was there in the mansion. The butler declined from answering his question, although he warned Kimuro that if he stepped within these grounds without his permission, then he would be treated as a trespasser, and butler would see through to eliminate Kimuro himself. Kimuro figured that the fact that the gate was open despite telling them to stay out meant that the butler was clearly trying to provoke them. Kimuro started to feel angry because of this guy, so he just stepped in to check it out for himself. Kimuro stepped inside the gate, and the butler took out his daggers and threw them at Kimuro. As the daggers approached Kimuro, he didn't flinch one bit, because he had a powerful ally by his side, Isle. She deflected those daggers with her sword. Isle announced that she would take care of this butler while he could go ahead. Kimuro thanked her and passed by the butler to go ahead in the mansion. Whereas, the butler thought Kimuro was weak because he wasn't able to react to his daggers, and it was only this girl who could prove to be a threat. So, he let him pass, and once Kimuro arrived at the gate of the house, he used his detection skill and saw that there were a lot of people inside the mansion. He could see that they were clearly lying in wait for the intruders, while there were 2 people inside a certain room in the backside, which was most likely Belsa and the Lord. He entered the mansion to first see through these first intruders, while the butler was clashing against Isle. The butler told Isle that Kimuro won't be returning alive, because they had been watching Belsa the whole time and knew that Kimuro and Isle would come. The butler described that there were many ruffians inside the mansion, who might be devouring Kimuro right at this very moment. Isle laughed it off and informed the butler that the fact that he let Kimuro pass inside proved that they don't stand a chance at all. It was her first time seeing Kimuro act so aggressively, which meant that right now, there was no one in this world who could stop Kimuro while he was standing on the defeated ruffians inside. Kimuro went towards the back room where the Lord was keeping Belsa hostage, and the moment he entered the room, the Lord attacked him with a fireball surprisingly. It was a direct hit, but even after that, Kimuro was completely unscathed. The Lord was shocked after seeing his attack fail, whereas Kimuro was glad that his clothes were fine. After that, he asked Belsa if she was okay, and once she confirmed she was fine, she asked him why he was here putting his life at risk. She also told him about a fire that broke out at her house, and by the time she regained consciousness, she found herself here. The Lord looked at her with anger and disgust, and Kimuro realized that he hadn't informed Belsa about anything. Kimuro understood that this Lord was trying to kill both Belsa and Kimuro together from the starting, because if any one of them lived, it would expose his vile actions to the public. He heard the same story from the attendants which the Lord Gyuk sent to him, but he instead beat them up and got everything he wanted to know. Kimuro informed Belsa out loud that this man was not the kind of person they thought he was, and he was also behind the acts which pushed the former Lord into retirement, while also taking advantage of her in her vulnerable state. Belsa was listening to all this with surprise, and she learned from Kamuro that the reason this lord was nice to hear was simply to serve his own agenda. Belsa shouted at the lord to confirm if this was the truth, and Gyuk didn't have anything to defend himself. He looked at Kamuro, who was just standing there in a chill while he felt cornered. Gyuk yelled out everything, including the truth himself, that 5 years ago, when lava from the nearby mountain flowed all the way down to the town, it caused great casualties and damage. And the lord at that time, Belsa's father, deeply cared about the people, so he used his own funds to help rebuild and recover the damage caused to people. However, one day, the caravans carrying valuable supplies which were being sent to the people got attacked, and it led to a scenario that people didn't get those supplies. Due to that one incident, they lost trust in Belsa's father and he had to abandon his post, which led to Gyuk becoming the next lord. And that was also why the anger of people didn't stop at the former lord but also exerted on his daughter, Belsa, and the criticism against her began to grow stronger. Belsa asked Lord Gyuk why he didn't support her at that time, even if he was the one to tell her to become a monster scholar. Gyuk replied that giving her the idea to become a monster scholar was just a facade, and he just wanted Belsa to die some way which couldn't be related back to him. So, the reason why he suggested she become a monster scholar was to hope that she might die one day trying to procure specimens, and avoid being suspected by others. He did all this because Belsa was the daughter of their previous lord, which made Gyuk think that she might one day seek to steal his position as the lord. So, Gyuk had even gone as far as to manipulate her surroundings in a way that she would die of starvation. But suddenly an outsider just showed up and began supporting her, which was why Gyuk was annoyed as hell and decided to take a direct action this time. Belsa was left bombarded with one painful reality thorn after another, and she fell into despair. Kamuro saw her from behind and he couldn't let her remain like that, so he called Gyuk a coward who was waiting 5 years for Belsa to die. Then Belsa muttered that she wanted to leave from here, so Kamuro helped her out of this. Gyuk exclaimed that this was not over yet, because resisting him would be marked as treason and the entire kingdom would be chasing after them, including the elites who were being raised in the Magic Academy in the capital. Kamuro spoke up that he was free to come after him whenever he wanted, which left Gyuk at a surprise, as Kamuro realized that if he made any move against him, he would make sure to stop him. Gyuk knew that threat of his wasn't just a bluff, so he stood there with his head low, while Kamuro brought Belsa to the outside. After that, she stopped in her steps and to Kamuro's surprise, she started laughing after hearing Kamuro's words before. Belsa stayed. She was a fool to have believed in the words of that Gyuk, and followed them all the way up till now without ever considering it could be lying. Belsa felt naive as she knew that she could be described properly by the word stupid. Kamuro stood there and heard her venting it out, while Belsa recalled that now she didn't have a house anymore. Her research burnt down with it, and she truly had nothing left in her life anymore. She started crying now that she had lost everything, and can't think of anything to make up for it. Kamuro went close to her and reached out his hand, saying that she could come with him. Belsa stopped crying and she was almost about to hold his hand, but couldn't for some reason. Kamuro recognized that feeling, and he asked her if she was afraid of trusting someone again, or if she was thinking about what she would do if she were to be betrayed again. Belsa couldn't deny that, after which Kamuro spoke up if that was the case, then all she needed was to do things herself and decide what to do. He told her that he had his own circumstances, and as a consequence, he only began his life here in this world recently. At the beginning, he had absolutely nothing, but some way or another, he managed to get by. Isle, who defeated the butler by this time, was also one of the comrades he met during his journey, and there were many he had to part with, but he had no regrets about that because he made all these decisions by himself. So, he asked Belsa if she would like to try it, and her eyes got hopeful hearing that. After that, Belsa raised her head and didn't hesitate to agree to go together with Kamuro. He was glad to have a new ally, and 1 week later they arrived at the port where Chief Borok got him a small boat and serviced it with the help of his workers. Belsa was ready to go without any problems, while the townspeople were regretting the anger they had on her. Once everything was set up, Kamuro received a warm see-off from everyone from the shipyard. He thanked everybody for making his time spent here enjoyable, and with that, they boarded the boat to set off for their next location. Everyone wished them a safe journey, but just a few days later when Kamuro arrived on a certain island, he couldn't see it being any safer at all. He wondered how their journey would progress on this island with monsters even larger than before. After crossing the ocean, they arrived at their next adventure to an island full of dense forests. This island was as abundant as the life forms here. Belsa was really excited after seeing so many new monsters, and animals like the wild boar here, which was really larger than any boar they've seen before. Kimuro added it looked dangerous as well as just like the size, but it wasn't a problem for Isle or Kimuro to deal with. Belsa stated that an adult boar should only be 2 meters at most, but the difference in these island ones made it really weird for them. Kimuro told her to remain just as concerned about her life, like her focus on research. But Belsa was the only starting, whereas Isle was even more excited to go and battle all these monsters. Kimuro seemed to be the only sane one amongst them, so he kept them in control until a large number of huge Mazmascals started running towards them, and Belsa was still acting like a child coming to the zoo. He told Isle that he would be trying his new rat poison spray, and she wanted to join him in the hunt as well. Belsa was surprised to see these two were really strong, and as they moved forward, Kimuro sighed and got his chance to try the rat poison on Mazmascals. He asked others if there were any more beasts around them, to which Isle replied that she killed all of them. Belsa started to observe and feel something was abnormal around this place, which was changing these monsters. Kimuro guessed that it might be the island evolving by itself, since it was common like how water snakes and land snakes evolve according to the environment. Belsa stated that it was still strange for monsters to evolve like that, and other than that, if there was a group of monsters, if they were to kill a monster then others would scatter and try to escape if possible. But it didn't seem to be the case here, because she noticed that when Isle eliminated one of them, they were still charging towards them. It was like they were being manipulated, and from Belsa's deductions, she felt like there was someone controlling them. She also pointed out that all the monsters came from the same direction, which kind of amazed Kimuro since he noticed that monster scholars can notice things differently than normal people. However, she was more excited about finding where these monsters originated from, which might just reveal the secret of this island. Kimuro was glad to see Belsa forget her previous life's tragedies and now become more cheerful than ever, although this side of her was quite dangerous as well, as she headed out to go for the places on a whim regardless of worrying about dangers. So when she was running in the forward direction, she got caught by Kimuro from behind. She thought he was getting her to do some things, while Kimuro just wanted to let her know it was dangerous so he would be the one moving ahead of them. Kimuro was doing his best to keep these two maniacs alive, and to keep Belsa on a leash. He warned her to act carefully, otherwise he would send her back to the port. The three continued exploring the island, and in their way, they encountered a giant snake. Isle's one slash from her sword was enough to deal with the snake, and as they kept defeating these ordinary monsters, Kimuro felt like he was walking in a half-dungeon with a forest, until their eyes fell upon a house located in the middle of this monster island. Kimuro decided to check the house from up close, and he noticed that they were surrounded. Apparently, through his detection skill, they got to know that the ones surrounding them were about 10 in numbers, and they were most likely archers. The mysterious attackers aimed their arrows at Kimuro and others, and they shot almost instantly on marking. One of their arrows was going to hit Belsa, so Kimuro protected her with his body, which was impenetrable to begin with. The attackers were caught off guard by that, and Kimuro let Isle deal with this one. He warned her beforehand that those people can shoot her at long range, to which she assured him she would be fine since there were just 10 people. After that, she stepped into the air and her foot stayed in the air as if there was a foothold in the air. Isle asked him why he was surprised, to which he replied that he thought she couldn't use magic. Isle reminded him that she had used this skill even at the time of his advancement exam as well, and informed him that she was not just a warrior, but a magical warrior. Kimuro began to wonder why she was so famous now, while Isle set out on her air footholds to deal with those archers. She ran in the air at the same speed on the ground, and at that speed, the archers had a hard time aiming at her. Isle closed in on them with a big jump, whereas Kimuro and Belsa were watching her nostalgic moves. Isle started beating the hell out of those archers in anger, and one by one, she managed to defeat all those attackers hiding in trees. Kimuro walked closer to the trees and saw them falling like apples being shaken out of a tree. Soon, Isle got back after taking care of all of them, and Kimuro thanked her for the help. She was joyed after being praised by him, and Belsa asked them out of curiosity if these two were dating. Isle asked her with a smile what she was talking about, whereas Kimuro made a gloomy face and straight up declined that he didn't think it would ever happen. Meanwhile, the attackers Isle just defeated got up and ran straight towards that home, and called out their master while alerting him that these intruders were really strong. Isle wondered what was going on, and Kimuro decided to follow them to the backyard. Belsa asked him if those guys were ghost tails, which would mean they were some kind of monsters, but Kimuro was keen to see why they could use human weapons. He went to the backyard, and when he looked through the windows, he saw it was a normal house inside. Kimuro saw there was even a calendar in the house, which didn't look like something this world had. Not only that, but after he walked a bit towards the backyard, he saw a water well also. Kimura wondered who lives in this place while he was looking at the well. Then suddenly, a head came from inside the well and hit Kimura's chin pretty hard. Both of them muttered something in Japanese, and this guy was surprised to see that Kimura was also an otherworlder like himself. Kimura asked him how did he know that he was another worlder, and to make explanations easier, the guy introduced himself to everyone as Marquez, and he was also another worlder like him. Later on, Kimura learned more about Marquez being called as the Dungeon Master, who manages the dungeon. He has a round body, large nose and big eyes with curly hair. He had a familiar approachable aura which Kimura could feel excited with. He felt a strange tightness in his chest, and after reaching Marquez's home, the excitement didn't last too long for Kimura. As Marquez and Belsa liked talking to each other about various things about the dungeon, she learned that the dungeon could be classified as an automated monster generator. Kimura was troubled by their constant talking because he didn't understand what they were saying at all about dungeons, cores, or anything else. Belsa asked him where he stopped understanding this, to which he replied hesitantly that he didn't get anything from the beginning at all. Belsa realized that she would have to take out a lot of time, but she explained it to him, and Kimura understood that dungeons were basically just caves with demonic beasts. But other than that, he didn't get terms like subspace inside the dungeon, or anything else. She asked him if he understood it now or not, then he tried his best not to let it show that he was still clueless. Belsa stated that this was something even Isle could understand, since she was quietly listening to them. But when they turned to Isle, she was already fast asleep. After that, he stated it must be because Belsa had started to accompany him recently, which was why he couldn't understand what she said much. She exclaimed at him for being rude there, and Marquez found them acting pretty close. Kimura said he might understand better if he sees the dungeon, after which Marquez asked them if they should go inside the dungeon and discuss his fellow otherworlders. Kimura and others were amazed as they went further inside Marquez's place, where Marquez introduced them to the entrance of the dungeon. Once he opened the entrance, Kimura was left amazed as he witnessed an unbelievable scene, with a vast desert, sky, and horizon along with scorching sun, radiating a violent year. There, monsters were dwelling in the deserts as if it was their natural habitat, and it was the first time Isle as well to see such monsters. Kimura was left astounded, as this was completely different from the time he entered the Red Dragon's cave. He learned that the dungeon was a space which was completely separated from the rest of the world. Within there, Marquez began to teach him and others more about the dungeon. It was really large enough to be considered another world. Then Kimura asked Marquez to wait until he took out pen and notebook to write notes. After that, he doesn't remember most of what Marquez told them, but as they kept following him, Kimura's imagination for the dungeons improved vastly. He learned that dungeons consisted of various rooms, consisting of different weathers, and in the lowermost part, the dungeon core. The dungeon core is a huge magic stone that acts as the power source of the dungeon, and it needs to be fed some magical energy in order to operate. So, Marquez did the job to extract the mana stones from the monsters and feed them to the core. Kimura asked what these mana stones were, and Marquez replied that mana stones were found in any monster's body. In that sense, it was also possible to detect monsters because of these mana stones. Then Belsa asked Marquez about more things, and she showed Marquez a book named Lisa's Monster Book. She stated this book was written by her mentor Lisa, and inside it, one person wrote that dungeon cores generate monsters without mana stone, and after those monsters ingest a certain amount of things, a mana stone was slowly formed inside them. Marquez told her this information was not far from the truth, and Belsa was excited to see that her research in demonic beasts seemed to be progressing in the right direction. She informed Kimura that the Mazmascals they defeated before must also have mana stones, and later on they would be recollected and fed to the dungeon core as well. Their theories were starting the match, except our protagonist Kimura, who was totally clueless about what these guys were talking about. He figured that he would ask Belsa to explain things he didn't understand later on. Suddenly, Belsa collapsed and she couldn't move anymore in this heat. Kimura guessed she must have been too excited and exhausted herself in the process. I'll ask them if she could stay here for a while, because she wanted to test out her strength against these monsters. Marquez told her she could rampage as much she wanted here, which was exactly what she wanted. Kimura got a bit concerned for Isle, so he called her out and gave her some of his extra clothes she could use for protection. He thought these clothes might keep her from getting injured, and the thought of it made Isle really happy. She asked what came over him suddenly to change towards her, to which he replied he wasn't sure about it either. After Belsa cooled down, Marquez and Kimura walked back to the house, and he heard that there was a plantation under the well. So, he went to check out the well from inside and climbed it down. And once he saw the tea plantation, it was totally something he didn't expect at all. Kimuro could never think a plantation this big could exist under a well. He asked Marquez if he could manage this place as well, to which Marquez replied he had been living for 300 years, so he had much time on his hands to do various things. Kimuro was shocked to hear Marquez's age, and Marquez apologized for not mentioning it earlier, but he was summoned here to subjugate the Demon King. Marquez used to be the hero of his time, and he was on a journey beside his comrades to subjugate the Demon King. He was abnormally strong, and also liked by his elf partner, along with being protected by the defense and resistance system skill. Not only that, but his way of taking skills was similar to Kimuro, and one day a skill tree appeared before him called the Immortal Body. He ended up taking it unhesitatingly, and thus he ended up with an undying body. Marquez brewed some tea for Kimuro, and told him to be careful because it was still hot. Suddenly, an arrow came from behind and it landed right on the table. Kimuro got startled by it, and because of that he spilled his tea. The ones who shot the arrow were those same ghosts, and they shot another arrow at him. This time, the arrow hit Marquez's head instead. The ghosts were feeling guilty to see that their arrow hit Marquez instead. Then Marquez scolded them, telling that Kimuro was not an invader, but his guest. They apologized to him right away, whereas Kimuro witnessed that Marquez was really immortal. Then Marquez told the ghosts to brew some tea for Kimuro as an apology, and they obeyed him right away. However, the tea that Kimuro tasted turned out to be really bad, as if those ghosts wanted to make him a ghost as well. Marquez recalled that he shouldn't have asked Geist-Tyler for that, since their brewing skill was very poor. Kimuro learned that these ghosts were called Geist-Tyler, which were some high-ranking ghosts with high intelligence, but Marquez called them useless. Marquez told the ghosts to go back to their place now, and they agreed to his command as if he was their master. Kimuro mentioned that those ghosts seemed pretty attached to Marquez, to which Marquez replied they were just some evil ghosts, which couldn't even brew tea. Kimuro felt like something could be done here, as he felt the gentle breeze flowing in the air. Later, after some talks, Marquez learned from Kimuro that he came to this world without knowing his role, which was why he was traveling around the world while working on extermination. Marquez envied his story a little because compared to his story, Marquez was called by her to subjugate Demon King 300 years ago, and he was still young, and it got really painful sometimes, but now looking back on it, those days of his were definitely the most sparkling moments of his life. Those two looked upon the sky, while Kimuro mentioned that must be his youth going well. Marquez felt warm after hearing that, and nodded in agreement that everyone experienced their youth at one point as well. For him, the youth was still something that had already long gone, but he could see those memories until now. Kimuro told him he was sounding like an old man, and Marquez couldn't disagree with that. Then Marquez spoke up to Kimuro, and to his surprise, Marquez told him not to be deceived by skill and status ever, even if it meant level reduction. He told Kimuro that skill and status made him arrogant, and he realized it when he ended up losing his companion. Marquez gave an important lesson to Kimuro that the most important thing than any strength was the strength of his heart, where he should toughen up. To explain it, he asked Kimuro what would happen if the dungeon core was taken away from the dungeon. He replied that in that case, the dungeon would crumble and swallow everything inside. Marquez confessed that it had been so long living for him that he forgot just who he took the skill for. He completely forgot about this heart's importance at that time, but now that he had a chance to tell this to a fellow otherworlder, he told him that if he were to suddenly have a bad premonition, he must remember what Marquez just told him. At the same time, Geist-Tyler came shouting out to call their master, and he asked them why they were being so noisy this time. They informed him that the snow foxes have multiplied too much in lower parts. Then Marquez got an idea, and asked Kimuro if he would like to accept this extermination request. Kimuro agreed to take upon this request, and then he went back to Marquez's house and started preparing for the extermination. Isle asked him why he was going in the midwinter area, to which he informed them about the request he got from Marquez. He asked if those two would like to join as well, to which Belsa stated she would pass, and instead of freezing to death, she would prefer reading the books, whereas our famous battle lover Isle agreed to go as well. He asked her if she was going to the even colder area with this outfit, and she replied it would work out somehow. Kimuro exclaimed that it was totally a no-go, and seeing them getting ready, Marquez recalled that these three looked very similar to how his companions and he used to prepare before every monster hunt. He reminisced about those days and fell into deeper thinking. Then Kimuro called out Marquez repeatedly, and asked if they could stop by for a while before heading out for the extermination request, since they needed some things to prepare. Marquez said it was no problem, and he would even gladly welcome him for any time, be it 100 years or more. Kimura was startled that he didn't want to stay that long. Then in any case, Marquez took his leave to prepare today's meal, and he went by happily to the farms. Kimura was glad to see Marquez seemed to be happy with him here, and thus once the time came, his work in the dungeon started. First, they went into the forest areas where they hunted a bear, and Isle dissected its skin. Then Kimura used his skills to form a proper clothing with that bear's skin to make a dress for her. Meanwhile, Belsa was studying on her study table. Marquez, on the other hand, was taking help of the ghosts to prepare the best meal they could with the help of everyone. And thus the ghosts gathered ingredients and kept working accordingly to prepare a feast. Marquez made sure to supervise them well and help in the kitchen himself also. Then Kimura came to Marquez, which gave him the idea that they were done preparing, and would be going now. Kimura confirmed with Marquez again that the midwinter area was under the mushrooms area, and it was because the magical energy from mushrooms was prey for many animals, and monsters devoured them and created an environmental cycle. After that, Kimura and Isle got ready in their winter dress, and Marquez was amazed by seeing their creativity to make winter clothing right here. Isle had to admit that these clothes were surely very warm, and Kimura explained a bit on how these coats would be helpful to not only retain warmth, but also conceal human scent. He was keeping this big fur in a small bag which was magically enhanced to store more things than the visible size. Marquez stated it won't be strange if a war were to break out for this bag, since it was truly an artifact class item. He was glad that it was Kimura who possessed it, and now Kimura and others were finally ready to visit the winter area, where they were quickly met upon with an incredibly freezing blizzard. Kimura was still not used to seeing how amazing dungeons were. The snow in this area piled up all the way to below his knee, and his field of vision was worse due to the blizzard. Soon, they spotted a snow fox, and it was just like the descriptions, and Kimura told Isle to slice it off. But when she went to attack the snow fox, something unexpected happened. Later that night, the meal was prepared and served on the table, and the drinks were already empty. It was because Isle drank all the bottles, because she was extremely angry as all the snow foxes slipped into the snow, and she hadn't been able to defeat even one of them. Kimura told her to not drink too much, but it couldn't be helped because she was she. And when he turned to Marquez, even Marquez was extremely drunk as well. Isle stayed. Kimura was the only one sober now, so he should drink some as well. He avoided drinking due to the work next day, while Isle and Marquez enjoyed themselves to the fullest. Kimura was happy to see this sight, but something was still troubling him, which was the things Marquez told him before about bad premonition. And he had one premonition right away, which was that Marquez wanted to die, but couldn't due to his immortality skill. In the morning earlier, Kimura had said sorry to Marquez and said that he couldn't fulfill his request to die. Actually, Marquez wanted Kimura to get a skill to steal another's ability, so that he could take his immortality and let Marquez die. Kimura made it clear that he won't do that, and apologized for breaking his hopes there. Back to the present, after they held a feast, Marquez and Isle were fast asleep, while Kimura was relieved to be able to smooth things over with Marquez. He smiled and got up to go outside for a walk. Then he noticed something at some distance and used his detection magic to check who it was. He recognized they were the ghosts, and thanked them for the hard work they've done to prepare the feast. The ghosts came down and asked him if he needed anything else from him, to which he replied that he just called them out because he saw them. Then he remembered one thing to rest somewhere, and asked the ghosts if they would join him to the tea plantation. After a few moments passed, they were all sitting in the tea plantation, and Kimura brewed some tea for himself. He looked at the sky, and the ghosts heard from him that the shape they were looking like was actually called an elf. So, because of that, he couldn't help but he was curious to ask them the reason behind it. The ghosts replied that their master said that he loved elves, and they were the most beautiful and kind-hearted beings. That wasn't the only thing, but Marquez had told them many other old stories, and Kimura started listening to Isekai'd about their life with Marquez. He learned from them that the wisdom they had right now was granted by none other than Marquez. Kimura didn't expect to hear that Isekai'd got their knowledge from the stories and the things inside them narrated by Marquez. It was from those stories they also learned more about Marquez's preferences, and they believed if they looked more like elves, then Marquez would be pleased by their appearance and have more fun out here. Then Kimura also told them for fun that Marquez made fun of their archery and tea. He laughed frankly and thanked them for sharing the story with him. He asked them if they would allow him to teach him something. Geist Tyler wasn't sure what he would teach them, and the next day, Kamuro and got back to the midwinter area with Isle, and this time, they came with a proper plan formed by Kamuro. After that, they began making small burrows, and once they made enough of them, Isle asked what use they would be. Kamuro came and explained his master extermination plan to her. That first of all they would burn the wild boar fur on top of its meat and let its aroma build up. After which, he would place these baits inside the burrows and then they would quickly hide. Kamuro figured that the problem from yesterday, of the snow foxes running into snow, wouldn't happen this time, and just as he expected, the snow foxes started to come for the bait, and they got trapped inside the burrow. Kamuro asked Isle to make it quick, and then both of them went on charging at the snow foxes with sharp knives and cut their necks. They managed to take out the ones who got trapped right now, and that day, Kamuro ended up exterminating about 30 snow foxes. Afterwards, it was back to the drinks where Marquez and Isle cheered each other on. Once it was done, Kamuro got up from his seat and went outside the room, leaving the other two sleeping behind. He went to the same tea plantation, and there he started teaching the same thing from yesterday to the Geist Tyler. Next day, he and Isle ended up reaching their milestone by 78 out of 500, and while they were working hard on extermination, Marquez was starting to feel a little off about it. And soon, the day arrived when they managed to exterminate 500 snow foxes, and it took them around 20 days to finish this job safely. In the meantime, Isle and Marquez became drinking buddies, and Belsa had completed 2 researches in this time frame. Next morning, it was finally the time when Kamuro and others had to leave, so he thanked Marquez for taking care of them for this long. Marquez claimed that he hadn't had this much fun in a long time, and then he went on to give Kamuro the reward for the quest. Kamuro didn't expect to receive such a huge amount of money, and he tried to decline it so many times. But in the end, he ended up getting all the money, albeit with a sad face. Marquez asked Kamuro for a favor, that if he were to ever come across an elf village, he wanted Kamuro to find a girl named Linya. He stated when elves die, their souls return to the world tree of their hometown and reborn. Kamuro wondered if this elf girl was related to the one Marquez had in his party, so he accepted his request and said he would do his best. Kamuro noticed that during the time he and Marquez spent together, he felt like there was a distance between them. Marquez sent him off with a smile on his face, which was more like the one given to strangers, but even so, he went ahead without being able to word it out to his 300-years-old senior who asked him to erase his existence. He wondered why there was even a farewell. For this once-in-a-lifetime encounter, they proceeded towards their boat, and on the way, Isle and Belsa seemed to be happy. But for some reason, Kamuro was not feeling up to it, and when Isle asked him what was wrong, he tightened his fist and ran back towards where Marquez was. He came running to him and being out of breath, and called out Marquez in a loud voice. Marquez wondered why Kamuro was here, and then they sat down together in the tea plantation, for Marquez to hear what Kamuro had to say.